Hey guys, welcome to episode 82. Can you believe it? Of Van Gogh Letters. This is quite an important episode because we are now going to the asylum with the artist and we're going to see how he deals with it. It's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to go to the asylum. What's it like for the first time really in his life to be sort of deprived of his freedom. He's now not going to be able to paint whenever he wants to. He's now not going to be able to go outside. I mean, if was ever an outdoor artist, it's this one. And what kind of effect is that going to have on him? And obviously, he thought when he went to the asylum, he was only going for 3 months, and it would end up being around about a year, which is quite a long time. It's also a year, not just any year. It's a year when his brother was having a wonderful life. It was also a year when other artists were having this wonderful opportunity at the World Fair, right? And so it's in those circumstances that he really has a serious setback, and those aren't always easy to recover from. Okay, so good to see you guys here, all five of you, saying like 654, 654, whatever. But doesn't if even if it was one or two of you, that would be enough. Chelsea, can I ask you a favor? Can you please tweet this video onto Twitter and just at my handle, and then I'll just retweet it in a second. Just because I haven't really had time to tell people that I'm doing this. So if you don't mind doing that, I'd really appreciate it. Hi Mignon, good to see you. I actually know another Mignon as well. Good to see you here. Okay, so in today's episode, we're going to deal with the month of May and hopefully at least catch up to June. Before we get to that, I want to. So we're going to be dealing with this letter. But before we do, I want to just quickly reintroduce Vincent van Gogh. We may know this, but it's important just to review it. Who is he? Who was he? A post-impressionist painter, a work notable for its beauty, its emotion, and its color. And if you're going to make a statement like that, that there's emotion in his art, wouldn't you say it's because there is emotion in the person? Not only emotion, but extraordinary emotion. This was a feeling artist, somebody who felt the rush of life in the world, felt the energy in the landscape, right? And of course, also experienced human emotions, right? Let's not forget that part. And one of the basic emotions that I think people forget about is that he was probably quite alone. He didn't have, for substantial periods of his life, he didn't have a girlfriend. He was never married, he never had a family, didn't have children, um, didn't really even have very good friends or friends that stuck by him. It was really only his brother Theo that was sort of a pillar of strength, and what a pillar of strength he was. But there was a little bit of a friendship with Gauguin, but it was also a kick in the teeth from Gauguin, and so um, we are dealing with an emotional person, a somewhat vulnerable person, a somewhat what's the word, sensitive person. But at the same time, this is what makes him so fascinating. Also, a very resilient human being, someone who could paint and people didn't buy his work and he would just paint regardless. And must I wish I had that fortitude when I'm making YouTube videos where you really don't give a crap what people think, what people say, you just do your thing. And I think that's quite important, but I also think what's also important is to give a crap what people think. And maybe if Van Gogh had engaged a little bit more with his fellow man, and I think this time in the asylum was a little bit of that, realizing that there are other people in the world, and so when he came out the other end, when he went to Auvers-sur-Oise, I've been there myself. I think he felt, I need to make a bit of an effort to be nice, to make myself known and knowable to my fellow man. And he did. He was became kind of a member of the family with the at the Revue Inn with the Revue family. They seemed to like him. They seemed to get him, and to some extent with Dr. Geshe as well. We'll deal with him in a moment. Well, not a moment, in a couple of episodes down the line. By the way, I got an alert just as I logged in that this channel is qualifies for memberships. So I'm going to be thinking about making these videos members only. And the reason is I sometimes get a $5 or $10 super chat after doing, say, 2 hours on Van Gogh letters. And how can I put it? Although I don't really, I'm certainly not doing this for the money. I also can't be doing it completely as a sort of a charity project. And so I'm thinking about doing this only members only. I might do it from 101 onwards. I'm just going to be thinking about it. I also don't like to sort of have to put the ball in your court. I'd rather not have to ask. And so the members only thing just sort of takes care of that. That's something I'm also thinking of doing on the other channel. When I put so much work into the deep dive series and fewer people than ever watch it, well, then I need to put that into members only. So I'm trying to think a little bit more intelligently about my work, and rather than just sort of do the Van Gogh thing where you just work and kind of somehow hope or expect or think that things are going to fall into place. Sometimes they don't. And so sometimes you need to adapt your strategy and also think about your audience kind of in a different way, I think. So that's kind of what's going on. This is also important that Van Gogh highly influenced 20th century art. And, if you think about what we're talking about here, we're talking about an artist who was a pariah, like right now in his life. He kind of had no one around him. I mean, even though his brother was supporting him, his brother was not actually bothering to come down to Arles and support him directly. And you might say he had really good excuses, but the bottom line is that he didn't. And so at this point in his life, he was truly, truly alone. He didn't have anyone kind of around him, anyone that he knew, a friendly face, right? And that would continue for a year. Imagine being a year anywhere where there's nobody you are not face to face with anybody for a full year that loves you, that knows you, that gets you. I think that would be quite hard to bear, right? The other thing here is that they say he struggled with mental illness. He struggled with mental illness. Do you agree with that? If you were trying to just describe this artist, would that be the first thing that would come to mind? Would that sort of be how can I put it? Would that be central to his story? Who is Vincent van Gogh? Well, he was an artist. He struggled with mental illness. Because I've said a moment ago that he was particularly resilient, given how lonely he was, given how much he was struggling, given the situation he's in right now, right? And so that is how he's thought of today, mentally ill. That's really how people think of Van Gogh today, as mentally ill. Now, I certainly won't argue with you if you said, well, what about right now? What about in 1889 in May, was he struggling with mental illness? I'd say it looks that way. And if you said, what about April and March? I'd say, yeah, it does look as though his grasp of reality is slipping, and that he's not um, in the place that he was previously, right? And the same applies to from May onwards, and that's the part we're going to be dealing with in the next couple of episodes. Basically, 82 to 90 or so is basically, was he losing his mind? How was he losing his mind? Could he not concentrate? Was he having hallucinations? Because you have mental illness that is really serious, and you also have mental illness that is kind of understandable, like suffering from anxiety, right? Anxiety attacks. And so it would be completely natural for anybody in this situation to be feeling anxious. I mean, he's just had everything taken away from him within the context of his brother suddenly out of nowhere having this incredible blossoming period where his brother's in love, going on a honeymoon, the whole family embracing Theo, and meanwhile Vincent's at the lowest point of his entire life. That's going to be that, and Theo's the most important person in Vincent's life, so that is definitely going to weigh heavily on him. And that part's true. He remained poor and virtually unknown through his life. And what do you think that's like, to be poor and unknown and alone, to struggle through poverty and being unknown and so on? What do you think that's like? Well, it's much harder if you're an artist. Part of your job as an artist is to communicate, to share, to engage, to sell a vision of your world, an interpretation of your world. And when nobody gets it, nobody receives it, nobody appreciates it, basically when everybody rejects it, it feels like it's a rejection of you. Now, if you think about it, there's sort of two scenarios. The one is you come up with an interpretation of the world that is not particularly useful. You come with an interpretation of the world that is not inspiring, not creative. It's not really worth anything. And so if you're rejected, well, the world was right to reject you, right? But that's completely different when you're actually doing incredible work. You actually know what you're doing. The work you're doing is actually of tremendous import and meaning to the human condition. You're giving an incredible gift to humanity. And guess what's happening? People are saying no thanks, or maybe the world's not ready for you. That's completely different. And I feel like I understand a little bit of that in the sense of in the true crime space, I've studied law. A lot of these other people haven't. I've sat in on trials. A lot of these other people haven't. I've written, even if I'd written 10 books, that would be a lot. A lot of these other people haven't. But even if you take all that and you throw it out the window, I've developed a kind of a authentic approach, which I think is quite important and meaningful. And it is definitely quite demoralizing to see how most people out there couldn't give a shit about that. Basically go, somebody actually said, I've been watching your videos lately and it looks like you are losing it. That's coming very close to what this is saying about Vincent van Gogh, which is basically, I don't know who you are, but you obviously have lost the plot. You don't know what is going on. And of course, the alternative to that is maybe you do and you don't, right? And maybe Vincent van Gogh was onto something with his interpretations of life through color and trying to express the vicissitudes of life through the sort of technique where he's painted really, really quickly. And so where people were basically saying, well, you don't know what you're doing. Even Gauguin was kind of saying, why Why are you painting this way? You know, Van Gogh had actually found his way to something and he knew it, but nobody else did. But that was enough for him. It was enough that he knew it, right? Right? And so that is a even more painful journey in a way, is when you sort of know that you know something, and yet you're very, very alone in that knowledge, in that journey. And of course he dies, and then what happens? He becomes one of the most celebrated artists of all time, one of the most valuable artists of all time, one of the most beloved artists of all time. You can't help thinking, cheapers, couldn't people have just given him a bit of a break in his own time? You know, couldn't people have just gone, okay, you look a little bit like a tramp, you're not from here, you know, you're an immigrant or whatever it is. Maybe we can put that aside and just look at your art, and see if we see something here. Why are you so dedicated to such a sad sack um, life? You know, what is really going on here? And probably if you asked him, probably if you met Van Gogh, he would probably not stop talking if you spoke to him, and that might be a bit of a turn off. If you're a woman, he might think you were flirting with him, and try and grab your hand or something, right? Now, let's just go through early life and family. There's a really important thing I want to share with you guys in terms of symbolism. But I first want to just get through this. He was born in Groot Sundert. Groot means great. His father was an austere country minister. Now, I really do believe that if his father wasn't a pastor, and also an austere pastor, he wouldn't have been as mentally strong as what he is or was. Meaning, he learned that sort of what do they call it? That sort of Protestant work ethic through the sort of family culture, right? And he just applied the Protestant work ethic to art in a very kind of mainstream sort of way. In a way, I'm also a product of that. I think I grew up um, within that same kind of Protestant work ethic, if you know what I mean. Um, okay, so we've got then his mother, Anna Carbentus, was a moody artist. His mother, whose love of nature, drawing, and watercolors was transferred to her son, right? Um, would you say that Vincent van Gogh was a moody artist? Let's um, let's quickly ask that question in chat. Would you say Van Gogh was a moody artist? See what you guys say. I'm going to step away just for a second so I can retweet that thing. Thanks, Robbie Robin. And then I'll come back to see what you guys answer. Okay, I'll be back in a second. Okay, I'm back. So let's have a look. Not moody at all. Not moody. Not moody. Well, Chelsea says very moody. Okay. Mignon says emotive, not moody. Ellie says moody as he painted his feelings. So there's quite a lot of disagreement here. Quite a few of you think that he was moody, and a couple of you think he wasn't moody. What's the answer? By the way, can anyone guess what I'm drinking here? Any thoughts what this is? I don't know whether he was depressed. I think he was often maybe a little bit sad, but depressed. Like, if you think about depression, it's someone who's not motivated, it's someone who often feels sorry for themselves, it's someone who's got no energy, it's someone who doesn't have a purpose in life. It's all those things. I don't think he was depressed. Oh, you are right. It's kind of diluted iced tea. I was waiting for someone to say, is that beer? Robbie Robbins says, maybe we've got different thoughts about moodiness. Okay, sad, right. Okay, so Yvonne, good to see you here on the highway to Las Vegas, but trying to listen and participate. By the way, Yvonne, I've been watching The Mexican with Brad Pitt and Julia Roberts, and there's a scene where she goes to Vegas. Kind of definitely made me watch it with some fondness, because I can say I've been to Vegas now, just for a couple of hours, but all the same. Now let's deal with that question. Would you say Van Gogh was a moody artist? I know what I think, but I think the best way to deal with it is through his letters. Does he come across moody in his letters? Now moody tends to be negative, like someone who complains, someone who and often complains in a negative sense. I can't believe this happened. The weather's crap. I can't believe I haven't sold a painting. I can't believe they're kicking me out of this town. I can't believe you haven't visited me, Theo. Um, wow, I'm really not enjoying not having any money. Uh, all those things. Does that come through in his letters? Does that come through in his letters?
Moody.
What does moody mean? It means unpredictable, temperamental, emotional, volatile, capricious. But it's often a negative thing: sour, depressed, morose, gloomy, sulky, sullen, fitful, erratic, unsteady, melancholic. Now, you could certainly kind of make the case that he's often some of those things. I mean, sometimes he is temperamental, sometimes he is unpredictable, sometimes he is, I don't know if I want to say unstable. Certainly right now he seems a little unstable. But I don't know if he comes across as sullen or sulky or morose or gloomy, even missing one ear, or glum or depressed or dejected or despondent. Even when he's in a terrible state, he doesn't come across as sour or any of those things. And yet he is some of these things. He is introspective. He is emotional. But does emotional mean moody? Or is emotional someone who feels, right? Let's see what you guys are saying. And I think that really says a lot. I don't think his art is gloomy. If you look at Starry Night, he painted about a month from now, in terms of the chronology, in terms of he's about to go into the asylum. Is he painting a cloud above Saint-Remy? Is he painting this sort of dark, blackened, shadowy place? Or is he painting this place that's sparkling and vigorous and scintillating and starry and quirk, or almost whimsical, right? So someone who's kind of quite new says, I think he probably was mentally ill. Okay. Well, how many letters, Claudia, have you read? If any? I just wonder. So I don't think he's gloomy at all. I think he's got reason to be gloomy. I don't think he comes across as someone who is sulking and sad and depressed and feeling sorry for himself, even though he's got very good reason to feel all of those things, especially right now. So we are going to kind of deal with that idea, that question, when we go to the letter. Let's just continue to look at this. Van Gogh was exactly 1 year after his parents' first son, also named Vincent, was stillborn. So you know what? The firstborn child of the Van Goghs could just as easily have been, how can I put it? Van Gogh could just as easily have been the stillborn child, and the world would have lost this incredible force, this incredible spirit. And so one wonders how that impacted Van Gogh, where he thought, I wonder who my brother would have been, or also almost like this idea of death, that you could die before you even live, so you really need to live, right? And then it says, at a young age, he was melancholy. So they're really pushing in this biography mentally ill, and melancholy, and so on. Then we see Theo van Gogh, the eldest of 6 living children. Van Gogh had 2 younger brothers, Theo, who worked as an art dealer. And you know what's quite interesting to think about here is you actually have the younger brother supporting his older brother, and his older brother is kind of quite wayward, quite temperamental, quite strange in certain ways. And I think you'd almost imagine that it would work the other way, that an older brother would take a temperamental younger brother under their wing. But in a very real sense, Theo, it almost plays the role of the older brother, of the sort of guardian, custodian. Theo would play an important part in his older brother's life as a confident supporter and art dealer, absolutely. Without Theo, would there be a Vincent? And without Theo's wife, would there be a legacy to Vincent van Gogh? Okay, so there is quite a lot more to get through, but right now I want to jump into this from the Met. Vincent van Gogh, have you seen any of these etchings? The Road in Etten, Nursery in Schenkweg, some more of his art. It's also clear that Van Gogh was a ginger, right? I know the movie At Eternity's Gate starts with this re-envisioning, reimagining his shoes, taking his shoes off and painting them while the wind is blowing against the branches that are sort of scratching at his window. Look at the change in the palette between this picture and that picture. Look at the change between that picture and that picture. I mean, it would be easy to imagine that he's depressed here when I don't think he was, and that he was happy here, which I do think he was, but I think he was going through a lot more when he painted some of these paintings than when he painted this. Okay, and so the other thing to think about is that he was largely self-taught, right? He found his way by copying prints and studying 19th century drawing manuals and lesson books. And this is to me what I really admire about Van Gogh is he, when you say self-taught, you kind of think, oh, so he kind of picked up a sketchbook. I've only got this legal pad here, but almost like, oh, so he picked up a sketchbook and he just tried to draw. Is that how he was self-taught? Oh, so he tried to draw kind of on his own and kind of figured it out. No, well, actually, he was self-taught in that sense, but he was also self-taught in that he studied other artists in great detail. He read books about from great writers, and not only in many different languages, in French, in English. He read Shakespeare. He read Charles Dickens. I think I don't think he would have read Hemingway, but Hemingway is a little bit before his time, or he was before Hemingway's time. But some of the great writers, great French writers as well. He read Sherlock Holmes, right? And all of that is pretty incredible. He was. I think he was aware of the Jack the Ripper thing taking place, and so how he was self-taught was he was really very well educated, not only in art but in culture, right? Not just in the way other artists saw reality over a very long period of time, but he was very aware of what was happening in his time, and he felt a need to see the world in a particular way. And so, in a very real sense, he was an individual. He was a very original human being, and you don't see that very much these days. You don't see someone who has the courage, who has the resilience, who has the wherewithal to just follow their own path and take all the fucked upness that comes with that, meaning the criticism, the judgment, the sneering, contempt, the people who just don't understand you, but mostly the loneliness. You don't really get people who will be willing to put themselves through all of that adversity in the name of their art, in the name of what they believe, in the name of their who they originally are, in the name of. I don't think he's trying to be authentic, but he is authentic, and that means something to him, right? Zircon, good to see you here. Okay, so what do you guys say we jump into a letter? And so this was the letter we dealt with in 81. We finished 81 with basically where he wishes Theo happy birthday. And he even says to him, I wish I could pass some of my own physical strength onto you. Anyway, so let's go on to the next letter, which takes us into May. And that's where we're going to continue with this. Okay. My dear Theo, I've sent off two cases of canvases recently, D58 and 59 by goods train, and it'll be at least a week or so before you get them. There are lots of daubs among them which you will have to destroy, but I've sent them, such as they are, so that you will be able to keep what makes possible to you. I put in some fencing masks, and what do you think that's about? What do you think those fencing masks are related to? Those belong to Gauguin. At last, he has faced the weapons of war that Gauguin asked from him, and he's probably sent the swords along as well. And then he also says some studies of Gauguin's in the book by Lemonnier. Now, it is very interesting to ask, why doesn't he mention the swords? So does he send the swords and he doesn't mention them? Or does he not send the swords? Because it seems odd that he would. I think Gauguin said he wants his gloves, he wants his masks, he wants his swords. And so why would he send the masks separately? Wouldn't he send it all together? And so I think him not mentioning the swords is possibly a part of Van Gogh who just is a little cryptic. He doesn't where, as much as he seems to tell you everything, he seems very expressive and communicative. He is actually holding a little bit back, right? Now, before I forget, I just want to say this before I do forget. What is very important for any person, and let's also put it every person, is if you attach yourself to a symbol, that symbol can really work for you, right? If you attach yourself to a symbol, and that symbol can work for you, but it can also reach a point where the symbol no longer works for you. And that's where you can really unravel for and on behalf of that symbol. So I hate to give myself as an example, but in a way, the symbol that you live by, you sort of live by the sword. Well, you can also die by the sword, right? I think the lightest way I can share this example with you is I invested quite a lot. Sounds funny, but I had a weaver bird building nests outside my bedroom window, and in a way, that bird symbolized, in a way, what I was doing. That I was building a lot of nests, and it doesn't matter if I end up tearing many of them apart, and it doesn't matter if a lot of your work is wasted. And you know, the important thing is that you just keep going and that you stay motivated and so on. And then one day the bird just stopped and the bird disappeared and the bird was gone. And I couldn't help thinking that I actually felt the same way. I couldn't help thinking that I felt the same way. And then where does that kind of thinking take you? And of course, when I came back from America, the weaver bird was back and is back to building nests. But you've got to be careful being so invested in a symbol that it starts to kind of determine, it makes like a track, right? You've got to be careful. And sometimes you can change the symbol that you believe in, and maybe you should. Don't be a slave to your own symbolic framework. It is a device, nothing more. It doesn't define you. It can define you if you wanted to, but it's really just a device. What do you guys think of that? Do you get where I'm coming from? Think about if there are any symbols right now in your lives that you maybe need to do away with. It's symbols, it might be things that you've said to yourself your whole life, where you maybe just, I'm not sure whether it's the same bird. Like the bird that's there now seems to be building there slightly differently. So I don't know if it's the same bird. Maybe he did take a breather. On the other hand, Chelsea, he's it's the middle of winter. He shouldn't be building nests. So I think he might be a little bit confused. Okay, so I kind of wanted to make a bigger deal out of that than I have, but maybe I'll come back to it. Okay, so then he says, I've also sent you the book by Lemonnier. So while we're going through this letter, I want you to think about what I mentioned earlier again. Do you think he's moody? Now think about what's going on. He's about to freaking go to an asylum, right? He's about to lose his freedom. And it's also kind of a, what's the word? It's kind of humiliating. You know, he's when his brother's getting married and about to have a child, and Gauguin is doing his thing, selling his art, and other artists are going to be exhibiting at the World Fair. He's kind of, this is his deal. This is his deal. He's basically checking into a clinic. And within that context, is he moody? I would be like, I'm not really in the mood for this. this is going to be hard. This is going to be tough. I'm not feeling terribly motivated these days. And so how does he convey his feelings in his letters? Well, you would imagine someone in this situation would be like, well, just take me to the asylum. I'm not, what am I supposed to do? And instead, he's got like a to-do list. He's getting his art where it needs to go. He's packing up his life and all that kind of thing. Oh, I've just remembered the relevance of it. For Van Gogh, the big symbol of his life, the big thing around which his life had become something, was the yellow house, and now he's lost that, right? And that's why I say you can either let that symbol, which has fed you and nourished you and held you up and motivated you, when that symbol is working for you, you can either let it do that, or when that symbol is lost, you can let it drag you down. And you can imagine how the yellow house, losing the house that he's invested so much time into, so much time and effort, blood, sweat, and tears, so much of his heart, so much love and pain and sweat went into that. But when he loses that, he needs to let it go, and it's very difficult to do that. Like when you love someone, you don't just let them go, and you'd be a kind of a psychopath if you did that, or a sociopath. And so, by the same token, it's not going to be easy to let go of the yellow house and everything it represented. But in a way, you must find a new yellow house. You must find a new symbol. Instead of a yellow house, what about just the sun itself? Instead of a physical structure, what about a field drenched in sunlight, quivering in what about pursuing a picture that represents what the yellow house represents, if you know what I'm saying? If the yellow house represents hope and life and security and promise and optimism and golden opportunity, well, it's still just a building. And so what if one can represent those thoughts and feelings into something that's going to actually enrich other people? And isn't that what Starry Night ultimately was? All those hopes in the yellow house, in a way. All I'm saying is he really was, when he went to the asylum, this was a farewell to one of the most important symbols of his life, that it was a symbol that belonged to him. It was a symbol that he believed in and breathed life into, and a symbol that housed him and was like a small little theater of dreams, but now it's gone. And is that now going to become a cage? Is that going to become a prison, right? And so with that in mind, let's look at whether he's moody in terms of this letter, which is kind of one of the last letters he writes before he goes into the asylum. Does he come across as embittered? And he would have every right to be. Does he come across as self-pitying? And he would have every right to be. Does he come across as overly emotional, erratic, unstable, all those things that have to do with moodiness, right? Does he come across in his letter as unsteady, depressed, dejected, all of these things? Well, let's have a look. Having the precaution of paying 30 francs in advance to the manager, I'm naturally here still, but they cannot keep me indefinitely, and it is more than time to decide. So he is up for it. He's like, you know what? It's time that I left. Bear in mind that shutting me up in an asylum will be expensive in the long run. He's not saying, bear in mind, putting me in an asylum It's not going to be very nice. I'm going to, he's kind of making a pragmatic case. It might be quite expensive. And he says, though probably less so than taking a house again. Besides, the thought of beginning to live alone again is an absolute horror to me. And there you have it. There you have the thing that is the most devastating to him. Is he mentally ill, or is he just really, really, really lonely? And he can't actually even imagine if Theo said, guess what? I've got a pink house waiting for you. And by the way, there's a book, My Family and Other Animals, where Gerald Durrell on the island of Corfu literally lives in, I think it's called the Strawberry House, and this house, houses are different colors. But literally, if Theo had said, Vincent, I've got the perfect place for you. It's the pink house just around the corner. Off you go. Look at what he says. Look at what he says. I posted it over there. The thought of beginning to live alone is an absolute horror. And so he is absolutely, absolutely, that is the trauma that is actually dealing with this incredible loneliness, right? And he signed up to be an artist, but he didn't quite sign up for this part. He didn't realize how much and for how long the world would basically just reject him and just go like, you know what? No, 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 no. And that is why Gauguin represented so much. It was not just two artists working together, it was him not being alone. It was him having a friend, him, kind of situation. And so, was he mentally ill, or was he just very lonely? Was he someone who had a creepy attitude to women, or was he just very lonely? Okay, so he goes on to say, I should like to enlist. What I'm afraid of is, as my accident is known all over town here, that they would refuse me. But the thing I dread, or rather the thing that makes me faint-hearted, is the probability of a refusal here. If I had some acquaintance who could shove me into the Legion for 5 years, I should go. And so it's almost like he's thinking, where can I be where I won't be alone? Well, a madhouse, a hospital, the army. I just need to be somewhere where I'm not going to be alone. But the problem is he's kind of been made a pariah. Everyone thinks he's mad or crazy, and so that's making him even more lonely. And so he's in a kind of social death, a lonely person in a social death, an isolated person in a social. When I say social death, it kind of means people have decided you're a nobody and a nothing, and you're also not worth knowing, and we are, as a collective, pushing you aside. And now you, that person, you say, well, I really need I need some companionship. It's going to be quite difficult to solve that problem. And so he says, only I do not want this to be thought a fresh act of madness on my part. And that is why I speak of it to you as well as Monsieur Saul, so that if I did go, it would be in all serenity and after mature consideration. So here you have a very good idea of how Van Gogh is saying, the other people here think I'm mad. He also says, what does he say over here? My accident is known all over here. That's how he refers to it. My accident, almost like I made a mistake. My accident, not what Gauguin did or our argument or anything like that. And then he talks about a fresh act of madness. But he's not. Look at the way he describes it. It's very sensible. He's very self-aware. He's saying, I am feeling a little faint-hearted. I'm not feeling mad. I'm feeling faint-hearted. I'm not feeling depressed. I'm feeling horrified to be alone, right? And he's saying, if I did make this decision, it would be within serenity and mature consideration. Do mad people talk about mature consideration? Do mad people refer to themselves as, what, I'm feeling a little bit faint-hearted? Or do they say, I'm just so pathetic, or whatever it is? So anyway, he goes on to say, for bear in mind to go and spending money on this painting when things might come to such a pitch that you would be short of money for your own housekeeping would be atrocious. And you know well that the chances of success are abominable. Besides, I'm so convinced that it is an irresistible force majeure that has frustrated me. Moreover, in the future, there might possibly be our sister to be provided for. So his concern right here is money. And one of the big theories about why he supposedly took his life about a year and 3 months after this point was that he felt, wow, I don't think Theo's going to be able to afford to look after me. So instead of talking to him about it, I'll just take my life. Well, now is especially a burden to Theo. Theo's got to pay 100 francs a month for him to be in a hospital where he's really not going to be producing nearly as much art as he was. And Theo's just gotten married. So Vincent's very aware of that aspect. So why would the money aspect be a big deal then when it was a big deal now? And it was actually always a big deal. But there isn't really any sense of him being gloomy or moody. Is making a practical conversation about what should I be doing? What are my alternatives? What is the financial reality here? Pretty clear-headed thinking, if you ask me. Then he says, again, you know what? Maybe I should join the Legion. And he says, the thing is, I've become timid and hesitant since I've been living like a machine. There's another very astute disclosure. It's absolutely true. Absolutely true what he's saying. I've been living like a machine. I know what that's like. You make yourself secondary constantly. You make what you would like or whatever secondary, and your work ethic is always primary. But there's a cost to that. There's a personal cost to that. He says, I've become timid and hesitant. And I think what he means is, he wants to meet people, he wants to have friends, but he, although he believes in himself as an artist, he doesn't really have the kind of social the confidence in himself in a social setting. And of course he wouldn't, because if you're alone for vast stretches of time, then you're going to lose practice. You are going to become timid, you are going to become hesitant, and even doubly so when you have an incident like this where the town throws you out. You are going to be a little intimidated by other people. You're going to be a bit hesitant to trust other people. And it's not just the town treating him in this way. It's also Gauguin. Gauguin abandoned him, irrespective of what happened. Vincent almost bled to death, almost lost his life. And in the middle of that, the person closest to him, the person that he's lived with and they've sort of made art together, just leaves him just like that. So if you think about it, it's kind of a double betrayal. Obviously, from Theo's side, it's not that personal, but it amounts to the same thing. When Vincent is in a very bad place, Theo's just not there for him, physically not there, even to some extent mentally not there. He is still supportive, but I mean, true support would have been coming to visit him, wouldn't it? And he doesn't do that. And so he actually experiences a kind of double betrayal. One from Theo, which is not really deliberate, but it amounts to the same thing. Theo's just not there for him really anymore in the way that he was. But then the real betrayal of Gorgan, it's a double betrayal. And Vincent's not got too many friends. He's pretty lonely as it is to be betrayed by the two most important people in his life. Okay, let's continue. He says, however, my health is very good and I'm working a little. I'm doing an avenue of pink flowering chestnuts and a little cherry tree in flower and a wisteria plant and a path in the park splashed with light and shade. I'm sorry, where's the moodiness here? My health is good. I'm working. I'm working on an avenue of pink flowering chestnuts. I'm not painting snails slugging their way across dark cobbles, right? I'm not painting a mole burrowing its way through the dark earth, right? I'm painting flowering chestnuts and a little cherry tree in flower. That's his focus. He says, this will make a pendant to the garden, which is in the walnut frame. If I talk about enlisting for 5 years, don't go thinking that I'm doing this with the idea of sacrificing myself or of doing a good deed. I've been in a hole all my life. Well, this is him talking quite, he's been quite forthright. I've been in a hole all my life, and my mental condition is not only vague now, it has always been so that whatever is done for me, I cannot think things out so as to balance my life. And so somebody saying that he was mentally ill is saying, see, I told you he struggled with mental illness. You see, I'm right. I'm telling you, he struggled with mental illness his whole life. Okay. And so you would say, well, there it is. He's admitting it. He says, I've been in a hole my whole life. I've had a mental condition. It's always been like that. Do you agree? So if he says, I've been in a hole and my mental condition is vague now, but it has always been so, does that mean that he has been mentally ill his whole life? I suppose you could say that being an artist, being an artist where you can't sell your work and you nevertheless persist, you could say that that is a kind of mental illness. Of course, it's not. I mean, but you could argue that doing something like that, which is arguably pointless and without any result, without any reward, is crazy, right? But actually, it's not. If you find meaning in what you're doing, if you make it work, and he did. I mean, his brother was sort of paying his way. His brother believed in him, right? But you saying that that's crazy and he's crazy doesn't mean that he was crazy. It means that it was very difficult and people just didn't understand what he was doing. People still don't understand what he did. And then he talks a bit more about being a madman. He says, where I have to follow a rule, as here in the hospital, I feel at peace. So it's almost like he's saying, you know what, I can't be cracking the whip for myself anymore. I can't be my own slave driver because I'm driving myself to the bone, essentially. Can someone else just take responsibility for a while? Tell me what to do and I'll do it. And so he's saying, put me in a hospital and give me rules, great. Put me in the military and give me rules, great. It's just too much for me, right? And then he says it would be more or less the same thing if I were in the army. Now, if I certainly run a great risk of being refused because they know that I'm a madman or an epileptic, probably for good. Do you see how he conflates being a madman with epilepsy? You know, it's almost like he's saying something's going on with me that's beyond my control. It's a kind of madness that's creeping up, but it could also be epilepsy. Is he saying, I think I'm mad, or I believe I'm mad? Yvonne says, not mentally ill, just focused on one thing. I wish I could do that. He certainly was very focused. Then he says, what I've heard, there are 50,000 epileptics in France, only 4,000 who are confined. So it's not crazy what I'm saying. Perhaps I should soon be provided for, after speaking, for instance, to Dietal or Carandache in Paris. We need Bria here to pronounce for us. This idea would really be no wilder than any other. So let's think it over, but think in order to act. Meanwhile, I'm doing what I can and I have goodwill enough for any kind of work. It does not matter what, painting included. So it actually looks like he's looking for a job. He's looking for something to do, which is not the kind of thing someone who is gloomy or moody or depressed would do. He's still motivated, but he's also, to some extent, traumatized by what's happened to him. He's feeling intimidated. He's feeling hesitant. Well, he's not feeling paralyzed. He says, but the money painting costs crushes me with a feeling of debt. Is that him being self-pitying? Is that him being gloomy? No, it's a practical reality. And he's saying, you know what? It just is so hard for me to keep asking you for money. I really want to do art, but it's crushing me. He's feeling crushed with feelings of debt and worthlessness because he can't sell his art. Those are the feelings he's saying he's feeling, and he's expressing it really strongly. He's not saying, you know what, I feel a little awkward about the money situation. He's not saying, I feel a little funny about the money. He's saying, I'm crushed. It's actually a similar word that Barry Morphew used. I think he said, it has crushed me. He says, it crushes me with a feeling of debt and worthlessness. And it would be a good thing if it were possible that this would stop. Besides, I've said once and for all, if at present there's a decision to be made, it is better that you and Monsieur Sauls make it for me. And mind, I shan't say no to anything, not even to going to Saint-Remy, in spite of the obstacles of higher terms than we had hoped for, and of not having liberty to go outside to paint. We really must decide, because they cannot keep me here indefinitely. So, when he says, I shan't say no to anything, not even to going to Saint-Remy, you can see how he's thinking of Saint-Remy as a last resort. He's not thinking of Saint-Remy as the first resort, just as an option, because he knows he can't stay where he is anymore. He also knows the yellow house is out the equation, but so's all. He says, I told the manager that I'd be glad to pay them 60 francs, for instance, instead of 45, if I could stay here indefinitely. But their terms are fixed, it appears. So he's been trying to wangle another alternative. What if I just stay where I am right now? I think it's some other apartment in all. And they're saying, no, you've got to leave eventually. So although up until now nobody has said anything to me, I think it would be right to go. Is he moody? Is he feeling bad about this? No, he's resolved to go, right? Yvonne, thanks for being with us for the time being. I hope you enjoy Vegas. Have a good time. Claudia says there's still a stigma about epilepsy, and medication can influence you greatly. True. Some people think that he was suffering from epilepsy, and although there's some support for that, I don't think that was the case. But thinking about that as these fits that are coming, that's certainly totally different to madness. Chelsea, oh, okay, I take it back. Cool. Well, I'm glad that we are all still learning. I mean, it's an interesting way of thinking about it, right? I also think that he is capable of being moody. Every now and then there is a moody letter, but I don't think you could generalize and say Van Gogh was a moody dude. He was a moody bastard. I don't think he was. Introspective, yes. Uh, but not someone who is given to feeling irritated and that kind of thing. Okay, so he goes on to say, I might go and stay again at the night cafe where I've stored my furniture, but I should be in daily contact there with the very people who used to be my neighbors, for it is next door to the house where I had my studio. However, nobody says anything to me now in town, and I actually paint in the public garden without being much bothered by anything but the curiosity of passers by. So, you know, if he was lonely once upon a time, you can imagine he's utterly, utterly lonely now. The people are like, that's the guy who cut off his ear, or that's the guy who's mad, whatever, snickering behind his back. I've reread the article on Monet in Figaro and I like it much better than at first. Don't let's lose heart too much over material things. It is to the good that if necessary, I can go and lodge in the night cafe here and even board here. So if you think about it, he is kind of trying to, what's the word, avoid going to Saint Remy. He's basically saying, if you want me to go, I won't say no. But you can see he's still trying, he's holding out hope that he can maybe go somewhere else. He says, for the people there are friends of mine, naturally enough, since I've been and am one of their customers. It has been very hot today, and that always does me good. I've worked with more spirit than I've yet had. So he's not sounding dispirited, he's not despairing, he's not mawkish or mopish. He's sounding like he's overall in quite a good place. His health's good, he's working, and he's got some ideas. With a good handshake for you and also your wife, ever yours, Vincent. Now, let's see what Theo says. This is Theo's response. And it comes pretty much the same day. So it's obviously not a response to that letter, it's a response to a previous letter. My dear Vincent, many thanks for your letter, which shows us that at least your physical strength leaves nothing to be desired, seeing that you say you have too much of it. However, this is something you should not rely on. He's saying, don't rely on your physical strength. Feeling one's strength does not mean having much of it. That's actually a very good point from his brother. Feeling strong doesn't mean you are strong, right? And Alf, that's a really good point. You know, someone who's realistic isn't someone who is gloomy, well, or moody. Well, it could be, but someone who's being realistic is someone who's more practical, and they're tending not to be so emotional about things. They are simply appreciating what's going on, right? Okay. So he says, if it is really true, all the better. Now there's one thing in your letter which I entirely disapprove of, and I'm going to tell you what it is. And after that, you may do what you mean. I mean your plans to join the Foreign Legion. His brother's saying, don't do this. He says, it is meant as an act of despair, isn't it? For I don't think you have developed a taste for that profession spontaneously. The fact is that you can do no painting at the moment, that you are in a state of convalescence. And that's true. He is in a state of convalescence. He's healing, he's recovering. And this fact has given you the idea that you will never be able to paint again. And so you tell yourself that 3 months of being taken care of without being able to work costs money and don't bring any in. Now, imagine the pressure, the difficulty of needing to heal, needing to recover, needing to convalesce, but you don't have any money, right? So it's like a situation of you're trying to, it's almost like you're sick and you're trying to become healthy, but you've got the added stress of Where's the money going to come from? What am I going to do? And what's going to become of me? And in a way, don't laugh. I kind of went through that a little bit in America when I got COVID, and I kind of went through that a little bit in this last trip to America when I got quite a bad cold, which could even have been COVID. I mean, it was certainly stuck around for quite a while, 2 weeks, and it was not nothing. But what was difficult in both situations was basically kind of going, okay, I need to recover, I need to heal, I need to get my strength back. But at the same time, you're kind of thinking, I really can't afford this. This is so expensive. How can I put it? I'm missing out on all these opportunities. I need, like, although I'm not feeling completely well, maybe I've got enough strength to do this today. Although I'm not quite where I need to be, maybe I can do that and that, right? And every time you do, it kind of makes it harder to get the energy and for your immunity to build back up. And so I really understand that pressure where you are a very goal directed person. You've got certain goals and ambitions and things you want to do, and then at the same time you're actually not well. And so it's quite hard for a workaholic or a person with a strong work ethic that you've been imbued with, you've had it your whole life, to kind of just go, just stay where you are, do nothing, just relax, just get better, right? And you can do that, but then you also feel the financial pressure. And I must have felt that, especially when I was in Long Island and I'd hired a car, and then I had extend the hiring of that car, I think, by a couple of days. So you've hired a car and it's just sitting out there in the parking lot every day, another $100 or $200 going off. You in a hotel and you're not doing anything, and then you cancel a flight and then you book another flight, you're adding another couple of $100. You extend your stay at the hotel, just money, just flowing out, almost like you're bleeding to death. And you need to put that aside and just say, the important thing is that I stay put and heal. Meanwhile, people are saying to you, but this is COVID. You're not going to get over this. You're not going to just feel better even when you sort of are better. This is going to be a 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, or even longer deal. And so the pressure is on. So what do you do? Just go home. And that certainly was something that to consider. And that's something that Van Gogh has got to consider. Shouldn't I just go back to Theo? He said I could. That would kind of be the easy way out, but it would certainly not be that good for Theo or for Joe. And I would feel kind of humiliated and I would feel terrible. And so it's a similar situation. What definitely made my trip now to America so much easier was somebody kindly offered me timeshare points. And certainly in Nashville, I did actually give myself permission just to, I was actually coming near to the end of my trip, and I was just like, I want to go to the Summer Wells case and the Fabric of the Sebastian Rogers case, and I want to go to the Riley Strain thing, and I need to do all of this. And of course, I couldn't hire a car, which helped. I mean, if I could have hired a car, probably would have done that and would have done that. But that kind of helped me just stay where I was. And I certainly didn't want to go onto the next stage of my trip, still sick, and now carrying those problems and all that to Myrtle Beach. So I really wanted to be healthy when I got to Myrtle Beach. And I think I just was. I was just starting to finally shake off the whole thing. What I'm trying to convey is the horrible pressure that you sort of under, where I mean, I'm not in a situation where I don't have any money. I'm not in a situation where someone else, Theo, is paying for the whole trip. even so, you feel tremendous pressure that, wow, I can't just sit around. I don't have the luxury of just sitting around somewhere, right? And that's how he's feeling. Even more so because Theo is paying for it, and he's feeling, it's also self-esteem issue. He's feeling worthless. He's feeling, what else did he say? Guilty. What did he say? Let's just go back to that. I think he said worthless, and what's the other thing? A feeling of debt and worthlessness. And that's why he wants to go somewhere where it's just not going to be a burden to anyone. Like, don't let, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to say anything. Just let me go somewhere where I'm not adding to the terrible debts that I've already incurred. Like, I don't want to be a burden to somebody else. And that's why the asylum is beckoning, right? Very, very true. Very well put. And so his brother says to him, yeah, thanks, Zircon. Thank you. Thank you. What does he say? And this is where his brother is such a valuable support system and friend. He says, don't feel worthless. You mean a lot to me. Your work means a lot. And he says, you forget that. Suppose they let you work when you're a soldier, you will be kept like a boy in a boarding school. And that if you are afraid of the supervision of an establishment like the one at Saint Remy, you will have a great deal more to fear from the practices of military life. That is absolutely true. I've been in the Air Force. You don't get a terrible amount of free time, and they certainly don't seem to particularly like sensitive artists, right? So, yeah, his brother's basically saying you're going to get it as an artist, you're going to get a better deal at Saint Remy. And he says, viewed as a whole, this idea is born of an exaggerated dread and causing me expense and worry, and you consequently bother your head unnecessarily, right? And so he's saying, to Theo's credit, he's saying, your worrying about the financial burden to me is an exaggerated dread. He's not saying don't worry about it at all. He's saying don't worry about it. We'll sort it out. And then he says, last year was not a bad one for me as far as money is concerned. This is a little bit of a revelation from Theo. Theo's kind of saying, you know what? I actually had a good year last year. Relax. I had a good year last year. So, that's probably also why he's getting married. He feels like he's achieved something, and he's probably conveyed that to his family and to Joe and to her family. And so that's a good time to get married. If you are doing well, it's a good time to get married, right? And so it's kind of not surprising. He says last year was not a bad one as far as money is concerned. So you may count on what I sent you before without any scruple and without fear of causing me trouble. If it is not repulsive to you to go to Saint Remy, say for only a month, you will be examined by medical specialists and you will probably be able to profit by their advice. And so he's saying, you know what? Why don't you just go to Saint Remy for a month? Don't go to the army. Go there for a month. Let's see how it works out. And don't worry about what it's going to cost me. I'm fine. Then he says, on the other hand, the director of the establishment of Saint Remy tells me in a letter that he wrote that he will not pledge himself to anything with reference to allowing you to go out before he's examined you. He's telling his brother the truth. He's saying, you know what, it's not guaranteed. When you're in the asylum, it's not guaranteed that they're going to let you out. But I suppose after he has seen you, there will be no doubt about his leaving you free to go out in order to work. Now, what you have here is Theo's assessment of Vincent's mental health. And he's saying, and by the way, whoever, somebody left a comment saying, no, of course he was mentally ill his whole life. Well, I think someone who would know, if Van Gogh himself, if he said, well, you can't be your own diagnostician, right? You can't be your own doctor. Let's get anybody else except you. Well, look at his brother. His brother who's written hundreds of letters to Vincent, who's read hundreds of letters from Vincent like we have, knows him very, very well. And he's pretty confident. He's pretty clear. He says, you know what? Once the guys at Saint-Remy see you, there'll be no doubt about that they will let you go out in order to work. And guess what? He's right. Guess what? When he goes to Saint-Remy, he is allowed to leave the bounds of the asylum, right? So I don't know how many times I'm going to say the same thing. He's not mentally ill. His brother doesn't think he's mentally ill. The people at the asylum didn't think he's mentally ill. So why the fuck does everybody else insist that he was mentally ill? Do you know why? Because people can't think critically. They don't think critically. It's easy just to repeat the same tired dogma over and over again, right? This thing. He struggled with mental illness. Oh, that's who Vincent van Gogh was. No, actually isn't who he was. And that's so much about our reality today. Is our reality is simply repeating somebody else's misappreciation of reality, because no one thinks critically. One critical thinker can do so much to bring the world back to life. And in a way, that is Vincent van Gogh's gift to us, is that he thought about the world in a way different to many of us, which is another way of saying he thought critically about the world. And how did he think critically about the world? He studied artists and was critical of some and praised others. He studied writers and contemporary people who had important things to say. And he dealt with all of this through, whether you want to call it critical thinking or that he synthesized something out of it, but he basically took a lot of information and he made something original out of it that he thought the world needed and that he certainly felt, right? And that's why I say one person who can kind of be an original, think for your fucking self for a change, right, can really bring the world back to life, because there's so many sheep out there, right? One person just following another, repeating what another says, right? Because it's so difficult to think for yourself, right? And look at what happens when somebody freaking does. Sorry for all the expletives here, but I think sometimes it's justified. Look at what happens when somebody thinks for themselves. Well, they create incredible art. They create a new vision for the world and for themselves. Does it come easy? No, it doesn't. But is there tremendous gift in that originality? Because a lot of people have since been born and been inspired Van Gogh to say, you know what, I'm an original. I'm an acquired taste. I'm someone that's misunderstood. I've got something I want to do that nobody understands. I am going to be, to some extent, a martyr for my art, but I'm going to make sacrifices for what I believe in. I'm going to work really hard for this thing that's new and that people don't really understand. Whether you are Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, not so much him, but what's his name? Steve Jobs. I'm sure that they were inspired by Vincent van Gogh and quoted him to themselves and were inspired by his story, that the loneliness I'm going through, someone else went through before. And there is a reward at the end of the at the finish line. And if there isn't, it's okay. I can live with that. Me knowing what I'm doing is meaning enough and valuable enough, right? Thanks, Chelsea. Okay, so let's get back to the letter. So can you see that he says there's no doubt in my mind that they are going to let you work because you are not mad, because you are you are going to convince them, because I know you, that and you're going to be okay there. Then he says, as for me, I attribute a large part of your disease to the fact that your material existence has been too neglected. That is, again, Theo's assessment of what's going on with Vincent. Vincent's basically saying, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I can't deal with what's going on. Okay, well, take any human being and they've got no money and they don't have a job and that they don't have a home, and who is not going to feel extremely stressed? Who? Like, I mean, if you in most situations you can't live without paying rent, without buying food, and so if you've lost your home and you have a job that doesn't pay any money, you're an artist, and you get kicked out of the town that you live in, how are you going to survive? How are you going to live day to day? And your brother's just gotten married and he's not coming to see you. And what are you going to do? Of course, you're going to be extremely stressed. Of course, you're going to struggle to sleep. Of course, you're going to have panic attacks and anxiety problems and feel intimidated and feel timid and feel hesitant. And so Theo basically says, and I don't completely agree with this, although I think it's a really important point. He says, a large part of what you're going through is, it's almost like he's saying, not that you don't have money, but the material side of your existence has been neglected, meaning you're not eating properly, you don't have a home, you don't have really someone that can take care of you. You're It's almost like, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy, he's not even getting his basic needs met. He's not eating enough, he's not sleeping enough, he doesn't even have security, right? Think about how crushing that is. Trying to share a image of Maslow's there we go. Here's a good one. So have a look at this. And what I like about it is it's kind of a similar color to that, right? Can you guys see that? So he says to Vincent, I attribute a large part of your disease to you don't have your material existence, those needs met. Well, what things like food, shelter, warmth, right? He doesn't really have his basic needs met, even security or health. He doesn't have met. Love and belonging. Well, there's a little bit of love from Theo. His esteem is almost entirely self-generated. In a weird way, it's almost like it's an inverted pyramid that Van Gogh operates from self-actualization and esteem, and he doesn't really seem to care about any of these things. And of course, these things care about him because it's making his life a living hell, right? It's quite an interesting way of thinking about this, right? Oh wow, that's that's good to hear. Thanks, Robbie. Always good to be inspiring someone. Okay, so do you see what I'm getting at? This is what's making Van Gogh's life so tough. He's operating from the highest level of the pyramid, but without having really any of the foundational aspects which are kind of non-negotiable, but he doesn't have them anyway, right? And so he goes on to say, in an establishment like the one at Saint-Remy, there will be approximately the same regularity in the meal times. And I think this regularity will do you no harm. Well, think about it, just that on its own. Just think of this in a very plain way. Just Van Gogh being somewhere where he's going to have 3 square meals, probably for the first time in his life since he was a teenager, or maybe since he left Noonan. But it's probably going to be the first time in years that he's going to get 3 square meals, where it's like, it's this time breakfast, that time that. And I even struggle when I'm on the road and these are the breakfast times in a hotel. Even if I want to attend them, I often miss them just because I've got so much else going on. And so this is going to be a major, quite a lot of me comparing myself to Van Gogh, isn't there? But again, you must choose your symbols with care, and you must also know when to let them go, right? And so he says here, that regularity will do you no harm. Absolutely right. Van Gogh just eating properly is going to do so much for his mental and physical health, but especially his physical health. Then he says, now if you should prefer, we might try to get information about the establishment at Aix or Marseille in order to see whether they make other conditions there. What you ought to know is that from one point of view, you are not to be pitied, though it may seem so. And that is also very, such a great insight from his brother. His brother's saying, from a certain perspective, we shouldn't feel sorry for you. You're not pathetic. You're not helpless. You're not worthless. You're not some kind of basket case. You just need to recover. That's all it is. You just need to go somewhere to recover. That's all that needs to happen here, right? People don't need to feel sorry for you or kind of go out their way. You just need to go there, eat your meals, and they'll let you out beyond the grounds, do your thing, but just stay here for a while. Just get yourself sorted out. Theo understands, right? And of course, this isn't a response to his letter about him feeling faint-hearted and whatever. We'll see what he says in response to that. Then he says, how many are there who would be glad of having done the work you have accomplished? So true. So true. You might scoff at Van Gogh's existence and say, he suffered so much and he struggled so much and he went through so much and he experienced so much pain and he was so lonely. But on the other hand, he experienced so much meaning in his life. Every day was also a triumph. Every day he produced works of art that he didn't know it. Maybe he suspected it or thought it or maybe imagined it or hoped. But every day he was producing artworks that were going to change the world. Pretty extraordinary. Imagine that you go out one day and you do something and it's going to be put up in a building somewhere and it's going to impact millions of lives. And you go out the next day and you follow certain thoughts and ideas, and that's also going to impact people's lives and change the way people think about things. And so your own thought process is shaping generations. How meaningful is that compared to somebody who what do the rest of us do with our time and with our lives? And I'm not saying it doesn't mean anything. I'm just saying it might look like a struggle, and it was, and it might look like all these other things, but it was very meaningful to him. And I wrote a lot of books between the decade of my 40s and 50s, and not all of them, I would say maybe even as many as half of them, maybe even more, probably didn't sell and nobody read them, but they still meant something to me, to write them, to imagine them, to go through them. All those books that people didn't get and didn't read and haven't discovered, nevertheless had an impact on me and had an impact on where I needed to go, right? So you really shouldn't think of everything in terms of money or recognition. There's also a silent journey that's going on that has got tremendous value as well. Definitely. It's not only his belief in Vincent, but also he really understood Vincent in an authentic way. It's not like, I'm going to understand you because that's my job, or I'm going to believe in you because I'm your brother. He really did understand him. He really did believe in him. He really did support him in the way he needed to be supported, not out of pity or sympathy, but also out of um, a kind of a genuine um, soulmate kind of relationship. Chelsea, you could read a book called Holiday. It's definitely unusual fiction that I wrote. Have you read a book called Holiday? Another one, Hot Water, is I think quite a good book. And there's another one called The Devil Smokes Dunhill. You could read. You could also read Playing in South Africa's Game Parks. I don't think anyone's read that. And so on and so on. But I'm just saying, one shouldn't think about everything in terms of what you get in terms of payment. You can also think of it in what you learn, what you experience, how you grow, right? Yeah, on Amazon. By the way, Holiday has got some shocking moments in it, so take it with a pinch of salt. I actually wrote Holiday. It was inspired by Cormac McCarthy's The Road, so I wanted to tell exactly the same kind of story. Well, let me put it a little bit of a different way. I wanted to take this bleak landscape that's all burnt and ash, and I wanted to talk about how our world right now could transform into that. So I was trying to tell a story of that, and it's I think, quite a powerful story that nobody cares about. Of course, there's also bloodline and all the rest. Okay, anyway, let's get back to him. So he says, wasn't it your cherished wish to create something? And so what's happening here is Theo is reminding his brother who you are, right? Do you remember from The Lion King? Remember who you are, right? And sometimes we need somebody who loves us, somebody who knows us to say that, right? To remind us who we are. And that actually happened to me once. I mean, I feel like this is really self-indulgent. I don't really want to talk too much about me. I want to talk about Van Gogh. But can you remember an instance where somebody reminded you of who you were, right? It actually almost makes me want to cry. There's a scene in the movie Captain Marvel, and she's lost her memory, and she's operating on a kind of a somewhat an illusion and delusion, and she is being manipulated, but she has to some extent lost her sense of self. And she then finds a really good friend of hers. Her surname's Rambo, Monica, I think Monica Rambo. And that friend eventually says to her, tells her who she was, tells her who she is. I must say, whenever I see that, just talking about it actually makes me want to cry. It's just such a powerful and important thing that needs to happen sometimes in our lives, and that did happen in my life once. I was about to make a radical change. I was about to really throw in the towel on my whole creative life, where I was basically going to say, I gave it a shot. now I'm going to grow up and be a mature person. And because I did study economics, and now I'm going to make a living as a chartered financial planner. And I was going down this road, and I'd signed up for the course, and I'd paid for the course, and that's what I was going to do. And I went to a life coach, and I think I went to the life coach more for reinforcement of what I'd already decided. It was kind of like, I know what I want to do, I know what I'm gonna do, and you are going to convince me that, and kind of give me the confidence that's the right thing for me, right? And fortunately, I went to somebody who I wouldn't say is even a friend, is someone who knew me when I was at school, is someone who I was at school with, and he wasn't even in my class, he was just in the same year. But it was somebody who had some knowledge of who I was, and some familiarity about my story. And then when I told him what I was doing, he said to me, "Please don't do this." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "This isn't who you are. This is not who you are." And he said, "I've seen other people do this, and this is definitely not who you are." And I said, "It may not be who I am, but it's time to grow up." And he was like, "Do not do this." Well, what am I supposed to do? And then we had that conversation, and we spoke about validation and all these other different things, right? I'd like you guys to maybe write that down, and think carefully. Who did that for you? Who reminded you at a critical time who you were? Another person who did this was actually my friend Alex's sister. I was about to make a major change in my life, and she said, "Don't do it. Please don't do this." And I listened to what she said. Well, I heard what she said. I thought about what she said, and I eventually listened. That's also why Alex is such a great loss, to me personally, because he was someone who knew who I was, and they're not not too many of those people in the world. And being with him reminded me of who I was once upon a time and who I am in the present time. And it's not just that, it's also is a rarely authentic person, but also a rarely balanced, high achieving person, a person who just had this incredible ability to do so many different things so well, and he was really beloved by so many people. I mean, I was lucky enough to call him my friend, but he had hundreds of friends. He was well loved by a very large community, right? And that's something I had to learn as well. And that is, to me, the tremendous value of Van Gogh's story, is that you can validate yourself, even with the absence of any approval, any sales, any money, any popularity. In fact, the opposite, being rejected by society. You can validate yourself. But do so honestly, do so authentically. Don't just say, "You know what, I don't care what the world thinks, I'm cool." Well, maybe you are, but make sure that you are on the right path, objectively speaking, if you can. Alf says, "My mother, when I was going to throw in the towel in my last few months of nursing school." These people can change your lives, and if you've got the wrong people around you, they can change your lives for the worse. I think it's a great idea, but do they know who you are? And unfortunately, Gabby Petito had someone like that around her, someone who changed her life for the worse. Thanks a lot, Ellie. Thanks a lot. Okay, so remember these words. See if I can bring it up. Do you guys remember these words?
No. How could I?
You are what you have become. Look inside yourself, Simba. You are more than what you have become.
So did you hear that? You are more than what you have become. That's exactly where Van Gogh is right now. He's more than what he's become. He's about to go to an asylum. But it may feel like and look like that he is where he is, but he's not. He's far beyond that. But it's quite hard to think that when you're being thrown out by the town and even your brother's saying, hey, go to the asylum. It's quite hard to think in a way that is true and not self-defeating, in a way that is true and not kind of taking you to low self-esteem, in a way that is genuine and there's self-esteem, that you say, this is a setback, but it's okay. Because you are not where you find yourself today. You know, that path is still waiting for you. And so he says the following as well.
You must take your place in the circle of life.
And that is also what Vincent will be required to do as well. At the moment, he's kind of saying, I can't do this anymore. I can't, somebody else take charge, right? And I guess in a way, I was doing the same thing when I was going to become a financial planner. It's kind of, let me give myself over to this thing where you get a job and you have a role in society and it's very familiar and it's very clear. And I'm qualified to do this, and then I do that, right? Not something that is kind of this sort of strange, warm and fuzzy creative journey, which is also punishing and excruciating. Let's have this thing where it's about numbers and it's about profits and it's about these tax laws and it's about this and it's about that, right? And so he goes on to say this.
How can I go back? I'm not who I used to be.
Remember who you are. You are my son.
So it's not about going back, but it may be about stepping back. It's not about kind of stopping on the road you're on, turning around and going back. It's not about that. It's kind of more about just getting off the road, or being at a cross section and not knowing which way to go from there, and just getting off that journey until you've got more clarity about what you need to do. It's kind of about understanding the road that you really are, not going back on the road that you're on, right? And so he says,
No, please, don't leave me. Father, don't leave me.
and so I'm probably going to get a copyright strike for this, but it also comes down to the same thing. Remember who you are, not in a despairing, panicky, anxiety-fueled fest, but in a place of calm. And I do sometimes think that is what sickness does, is it forces you to slow down. And if you are getting the lesson from sickness, it's kind of saying, stop stretching yourself, stop doing these unhealthy things where you never sleep, you're always working, you're always moving, you're always planning the next thing. Remember who you are. Hold on. And you don't need to achieve this or that. You've already achieved, well, in certain respects. Just remember who you are. It's almost like someone who feels like it's raining, or they feel like the weather, and weather is a symbol for a larger state of things. I need to realize, if I just lift my head, I'm in the sunshine, I'm in the clouds. I just need to change my perspective, or change my approach, or change my attitude, and suddenly I'm back in the sunshine. But if I keep running on this treadmill, it's not going to change. And so I do need a change of perspective. I do need a change of my approach. And I think a lot of it's got to do with self-esteem. I think a lot of it's got to do with self-belief and kind of self-validation. If you are getting all of that from somebody else, now, obviously, if somebody says to you, remember who you are, and they remember who you are. That is important. But what's more important is you being able to, without ego, remember who you are in a way that's true and kind of constructive, right? Christina, thanks for joining us. Thanks, Chelsea. Okay, are you guys with me? So he says, wasn't it your cherished wish to create something? And if you think about it, in the fullness of time, boy, did he deliver on that. Boy, did he create something. And if you think about life, all of us who are here right now, we are in this little splinter of the spark of the life process on this little planet, and this is our time. What do we create during our time? We've been created, we've been given life. What do we create? What do we give the world? What do we leave the world behind with? And if you're a true crime creator, some of the cynical ones out there, do you say, well, I got my pound of flesh, I got my 500,000 subscribers, I got really rich? Okay, but what did you give? What did you create? Oh, I created a community. Maybe a community of people who don't think critically. What did you create? What gift did you give the world? And so that's what his brother reminds him of. It was your cherished wish to create. And I don't know, it kind of gives me goosebumps to think it wasn't very long after he said this that Vincent van Gogh made this, right? So, us looking on, in terms of the timeline right now, things aren't looking very good. Van Gogh feels like he's lost everything. Imagine in the midst of feeling like that. I don't know, I can't remember who I am. I can't remember what I want. I want to join the army. Maybe I can stay here. Everybody hates me, whatever. In the middle of that, you create the seminal, truly creative piece, Starry Night, which fills people with a sense of magic and hope and wonder. But look at the place it came out of. Such devastation, such brokenness, such despair. And yet he gives that gift to the world. He creates despite the destruction going on around him, right? All I'm saying is try to think of your life as well as in the context of creating something, even if it's an idea, even if it's an idea that serves you in your own life, right? Absolutely. Mel says, I've got nothing to leave the world except my two sons. Well, that's a lot. Two people that may have a certain kind of impact on their world, right? He goes on to say, by the way, Chelsea says, Mel, you've actually done more than that. It's also your poetry. Mel, you've definitely had a positive influence on my channel. I mean, that counts for something. Anyway, he says, if it was granted you to make what you have made, then why do you despair that at a time will come when you will do good work again? This is such a beautiful letter. He's almost speaking like a preacher, right? And these words you can also write down for yourself at a time that perhaps you feel low, at a time that maybe you feel worthless. It's a reminder that, you know what, you can't always achieve, you can't always be kind of in the black. Sometimes you have setbacks. Sometimes, you're not always going to be on the ball. And he says, if it was granted to you to make what you have made, and you might say, okay, by whom? By God, maybe. By the fates, maybe. By the talents you were born with, maybe. By the tricks of genetics and random whatever. Well, whatever it is. But for whatever reason, it's come to pass that you could make what you have already made. So why despair that a time will come when you will do good work again? You know, a time is going to come when, and I kind of said that when I was in Myrtle Beach, you know, choose your wave. You know, if there are no waves, don't despair. Choose your wave. Another wave is going to come, right? And so his brother really does know what to say to Vincent. It's not just chin up, old pal. You know, time heals all wounds, or some kind of empty nonsense like that. He's telling him what he needs to hear, but also the right thing, the true thing. And it's not an easy thing either. He's not saying something that is going to be easy. It's hard. You must go to the asylum. It's going to take a while. 3 square meals will help get you into a routine, and there you have it. He also doesn't say, like, go to the asylum and I'm sure it'll all work out. He says, you know what, they may not let you out. He's being realistic. He's not making some sort of, he's not telling his brother what his brother wants to hear. I mean, his brother probably wants to hear, you can go to the asylum and it'll all be fine. No, not necessarily. But I'm confident that it will be fine, and it was fine. Christina says, I must practice being my own Theo. You must do that, but you must also think about who is your best Theo. I'm sure there's someone out there that maybe is not Theo, but may come fairly close. And then he says, however bad society may be at present, there are still ways of living in it. And, you know, this is, I think, what makes it so difficult is his brother's very lonely and is in a society that actively rejects him, that actively hates him. And some people go into this and never come out of it. Richard Gere, I think, once made a comment about China at the Oscars, and I don't think his career ever recovered, right? I don't know whether maybe he wanted it to recover, but some people stumble and society condemn them and they never come out of it. And then he gives a couple of examples, Puvida, Chavan, Degas, and others. I feel sure that if you have the will, you'll be able to take up your work again very soon. And is 100% right. His brother does have the will in May 1890. And so his brother does suffer a bit of a setback of will, just like Simba does. Simba feels uncertain about who he is and what he needs to do. Then he says, for all that don't think that I am without fellow feeling for your disillusionment when, for example, you went back to your studio and found it all moldly because of the moisture. So he's saying, I feel you. And because he actually went to the Yellow House. Theo went there once. And he's realizing also what was lost. Yet be good of heart, your disasters will surely come to an end. The kindest regards from my wife, who is in good health. She's getting quite accustomed to the house. A hearty handshake. So you can see it's not a very long letter. You know, it's not as long as Vincent's letter, but it's powerful. It's thoughtful. And it's a necessary tonic to his brother. And so the next letter is the 3rd of May. Vincent to Theo. Your kind letter did me good today, honestly, so now here's for Saint-Remy. But I tell you once more, if on consideration and after consulting the doctor, it should perhaps be either necessary or simply advisable and wise to enlist, let's give it the same consideration as everything else and have no prejudice against it. That's all. You must put aside any idea of sacrificing it. The other day, I again wrote our sister that all through my life, or at least most of it, I have sought something other than a martyr's career, for which I'm not cut out. What is a martyr? And so do you think he was a martyr in July 1890? I don't. if I find trouble or cause it, honestly, I'm aghast at it. Certainly, I should respect, I should hardly admire martyrs and the like, but you must know that in Bouvard et Pécuchet, for instance, there's something very different which accords better with these little lives of ours. And now I'm packing up my trunk, and probably Monsieur Sauls will go over with me as soon as I can. Now, it's for me quite encouraging to think that Vincent had this wonderful letter from his brother to take with him to the asylum. It's not like that letter didn't exist or wasn't written at the time that it was needed. You can imagine this letter he probably would have read it quite a few times, would have given him the fortitude to take the next step, to go to the asylum with a little bit of a lighter heart than he otherwise would have. And so he says, now is what you say about Puvis and Delacroix is damn true. Those two have indeed demonstrated what painting could be, but don't let's confuse things that are worlds apart. Now, I as a painter shall never amount to anything important. I am absolutely sure of it. So he's saying, it's so true what you're saying about those painters, but it doesn't apply to me. And this is what is so tragic in a way, but also understandable, is that he's kind of facing reality in a way for the first time. He's kind of saying, it's over. The dream's over. I tried and I failed. It's over, right? I accept, I understand that I'm not cut out to be an artist. I'm never going to amount to anything important. And in a way, that was a very important realization, because that gave him the freedom. And I'm not saying he's fully appreciating it right now, is still kind of accepting it. But by the time he leaves the asylum, he's so fully absorbed that he doesn't really care anymore. And that's also why him taking his life just doesn't make any sense, because he'd reconciled himself to that here already, in the asylum already. Right? And I wonder if someone could travel through time and say, as he's writing those words, tap him on his shoulder and say, look, here's a picture of Starry Night. You haven't painted it yet, but it's going to be hung in a great museum in a city that actually doesn't even exist yet. It's just trying to see when New York actually kind of came into being. So I just want to quickly deal with this. New Amsterdam was the original name for New York. It kind of came into being in the mid 17th century, maybe slightly earlier. But it was basically how Manhattan came about. I wonder if they've got that picture that I saw. So when I was in the library in New York, the New York Public Library, I just saw a beautiful, I think it was a photo of Manhattan. Then it was called New Amsterdam, and it's not what you see on screen, but that was kind of what Amsterdam looked like in 1664, and that is 1650, 1660, a shadow of what it was about to become. Well, that's all we can actually see there. But the point is, in the same way that New Amsterdam would become Manhattan, one of the greatest cities in the world, so would this artist. And I mean, Manhattan started off as this, as that. Right? Pretty humble beginnings. And if you'd said to somebody, or if someone who lived there said, I'm never going to amount to anything important, you wouldn't struggle to believe it. But great things have small beginnings. That's Manhattan once upon a time, folks. The tallest building is a kind of a wooden church tower. Or maybe the spire of a ship is maybe even taller than that. I don't know, maybe a windmill. So, things can develop tremendously with effort and consistency and self-belief. But can you imagine if you said to Van Gogh, there's a little town in America, little place. One day it's going to be this incredible city, and your art's going to be exhibited there, and people are going to go crazy about it, right? He definitely, those words are actually quite ironic. I'm never going to amount to anything important. Well, he ended up amounting to pretty much one of the most important artists in art history. You could argue that he is the most important artist. It depends on what context and how you are looking at it. But it's hard to not think about Van Gogh when you think of just art. And he says, I'm absolutely sure of it. Well, guess what? You're absolutely wrong. And he says, suppose we all were changed, character, education, circumstances, then this or that might have been. This is him basically saying goodbye to his dream, saying farewell to who he was. He says, but we are too positive to get confused. I sometimes regret I did not simply stick to the Dutch palette with its grey tones. What a statement. I wish I'd just stuck with the snot-coloured, shit-coloured, mucus-coloured potato eaters. Thank God you didn't. Thank God you did change and brush away at landscapes of Montmartre without any fuss. I'm also thinking again of beginning to draw more with a reed pen, which, like last year's view of Montmayor, for instance, costs less and distracts my mind just as much. Today I made a drawing of that sort, which has turned out very dark and rather melancholy for spring. So if you've been saying, no, he is a moody artist, well, here's a moody picture. He says, this is a melancholy picture. It's a picture of a tree. As melancholy goes, it's not terribly sad. But he says, it's a drawing I did in spring, and it's kind of melancholy for spring, but it's not really that melancholy otherwise. It's a picture of a tree. He could have drawn a dead tree or something, or a tree that has been burnt or something like that. But he draws a living tree. There's still some spirit of life, even in his melancholy executions. He says, anyhow, whatever happens to me and in whatever circumstances I find myself, it's something which will keep me occupied enough and in some fashion might even make me a sort of livelihood. After all, for you as well as for me, in the long run, what is having a little more or a little less to contend with us? Certainly you enlisted a good deal sooner than I, if we come to that, at Goupil's. That's got a bit of a sense of humor. He's saying, you know what, you actually kind of joined the army by sticking it out at that company. That's a company he worked at, and he was one of the youngest people ever to work at that company. I think he was 15 years old. Obviously, they saw talent in him, and they were right. He says, where indeed you had some pretty bad moments often enough and didn't always get much thanks for them. And indeed, you did it with zeal and devotion. Look at what's going on. He is giving his brother a, what do they call it? He's giving kind of an endorsement. Is giving his brother encouragement at the exact moment that he kind of needs it. He says, for just then, father was somewhat broke with that big family and everything had to be kept going. And you threw yourself into it, body and soul. During my illness, I've been thinking of all these old things with a good deal of emotion. After all, the main thing is to feel our closeness to one another, and that is not yet shaken. And so he does feel Theo's love for him, but more than that, he feels Theo's soul, that Theo understands him and that he's not alone, right? He feels in that letter that Theo knows what's going on and that he's kind of safe. I have a sort of hope that with what on the whole I know of my art, the time will come when I shall produce again, even in the asylum. And that has come from Theo. Theo said, you know, it's going to happen again. What use would the more artificial life of an artist in Paris be to me? And so you almost think that he has been pining in a way to return to Paris, just like Gauguin has. Well, Gauguin returned to Paris and then from there onward. But he says, I should never be more than half taken in by it, and so should lack the initial enthusiasm indispensable to starting me off. It is amazing how well I am physically, but it isn't enough to be the basis of any hope for its being the same with me mentally. I would willingly, once I am a little known there, try to become a hospital orderly little by little, in short, to work at something and have some occupation again. So this is his idea. You know, I think I'll kind of become a male nurse when I'm at the asylum. I'll make myself useful. Charles says, I love the potato eaters and the one of his shoes. Nice to be here. Sorry, I was just being a little bit sarcastic there. Potato eaters was certainly a huge milestone in his journey as an artist. I should be terribly in need of old Pangloss if in the natural course of things I should happen to turn amorous again. So he's even thinking about falling in love. After all, alcohol and tobacco have so much good or bad, it's rather relative that they are anti-aphrodisiacs. Does he sound moody in this letter? He actually sounds light-hearted. He sounds quite kind of matter of fact, and yet it's not a light letter. He remembers things. He remembers his brother at Goupil. He remembers the past. He talks about anti-aphrodisiacs, not always to be despised in the exercise of the arts. Well, that's going to be the test. And one mustn't wholly forget to poke fun at things. For virtue and temperance, I am only too afraid, will again lead me into those parts where the compass is apt to go overboard pretty quickly. And where this time I must try to have less passion and more good humor. I can't help but think that, is that a reference maybe to Gauguin and the ear incident? Was he very passionate, perhaps also got drunk and was passionate while drunk, and didn't have enough of a sense of humor with Gauguin and really turned Gauguin off, that led to what happened? He says, the passionate factor is no great matter to me. So, if you say Van Gogh is very emotional, has mental illness, I would say, I think he is a passionate, intense person rather than emotional, although there is emotion and there's feeling, but I find him more an intense person. He says, as long as the power remains, as I dare hope, of feeling affection for the fellow creatures with whom one must live. How is old Tanguy? You must remember me to him. I see in the papers that there are some good things at the salon. Listen, do not become completely and exclusively impressionist. After all, if there's good in anything, don't let's lose sight of it. Certainly, color is progressing primarily under the influence of the Impressionists, even when they go astray, but already Delacroix had already reached more completeness than they. So he seems to be a little almost like he's changing his mind about color. I mean, just a moment ago, he was saying, I was thinking about going back to um, the gray tones, right? And here, and then a few paragraphs later, he's back to being enthusiastic about color. And then he says, confound it all, Malay who has hardly any color, what work it is. Madness is salutary in that one becomes less exclusive. Not sure what that really means. Salutary. That you're saying goodbye, or what? Good. Madness is good that you become less exclusive. Okay. Advantageous, healthy, beneficial. Okay. As an artist, you are only a link in a chain, and whatever you find, you can find comfort in it. I've heard of an interior all in green with a woman in green at the salon, which was well spoken of, also of a portrait by Mathey and another by Besnard, the Siren. They also say that there's something extraordinary by someone called Zorn. Is he worried? Is he that worried about himself? He's still very interested in art. He talks about, nevertheless, I still think his Lady with a Glove in the Luxembourg very good. After all, there are some not too serious things which I like very much, such as a book like Bel Ami, and the work of Carolus is a little like that. However, our period has been like that, and all of Badingue's period as well. And if a painter paints as he sees, he always remains somebody. Healthy, that's right. Okay. To paint figures as Claude Monet paints landscapes. So there's somebody he really admires, and Claude Monet is a contemporary of his. That still, in spite of everything, remains to be done, unless one is to see only Monet in all the Impressionists. After all, in figure, Delacroix, Malay, and several sculptors have done far better work than the Impressionists and even J. Breton. In short, my boy, let's be fair, and while withdrawing, I tell you, whenever we think we are getting too old to class ourselves with the younger men, let us remember that in our time we have loved Malay, Breton, Israels, Whistler, Delacroix, and Lees. Whistler, by the way, is an American artist. And I'm quite sure that for my part, I'm pretty well convinced that I shall see no future beyond that, nor desire one. Now, society being what it is, we naturally cannot wish that it should conform to our personal needs. Now, something that I really admire Van Gogh for is society has treated him like shit overall, in general. And yet he still wants to, part of the creative process is giving a gift to society, is exposing oneself to society. The opposite of that would be to not continue being an artist, right? And I think I'm a little bit different to Van Gogh in this respect. Although, how can I put it? Although I can, to some extent, put a lot of the criticism and rejection and nastiness in a drawer, I've got to say I've got my limit. And there's a point where if you take me over that limit, I would be very quick to say, I'm not going to cast pearls before swine. I'm not going to waste my time and my life for you. And this is obviously not to any of you out there watching. It's to the rabble, the haters, and there are a lot of them out there. You guys don't see, like, I get comments emailed to me anyway, but I wouldn't be opposed to basically reaching a point where I said, I think that's enough. I've given enough. I'm now going to be quite selfish and move away from a creative existence, and I'm going to instead do something else. And you might say sport isn't creative. I think it is. It's just another expression of it. I suppose it also depends on how you do it. But I'm just saying, I really admire Van Gogh that even after a town kicks him out, he still has room in his heart to give of himself, because art is a gift to society. He still is able to do that. I stay in a complex where the people treat me really horribly, and basically I'm told I'm a nothing. So I do have a little bit of Van Gogh's experience in my own life, in reality, right where I live, right? And because of that, not only do I not want to live here, it also makes me feel like kind of turning my back on society. If you're going to be so hateful and I mean, it's totally unnecessary to undermine someone in this way. To I don't know, it's totally unnecessary. But if you're going to do that, then I'm not going to. I'm going to. There's going to be a reaction from me in the sense of I'm going to shut down. I'm going to go into my cave or whatever. I'm not going to give of myself in the way that I've been giving of myself, if that makes sense. And I mean, this is just a complex. It's not like a whole town. And I haven't been kicked out that I've got to live in an asylum. I'm just saying it's extraordinary to me that he still has that almost that pilgrim's heart that is willing to give of himself, even though so much has been taken away from him. I find that really incredible. I really find that pretty incredible. I must say, I feel the burden of where I stay when I go to America, and I suddenly feel happy. I suddenly feel like, I don't know, you know, I mean, I love my dog and I do have some friends here, but I also definitely have this heaviness of critics and plotters and underminers and complainers and all that. I definitely have that, and it's not fun. And I would try and have a certain kind of resilience to put that aside, right? So what does he say? Society being what it is, we naturally cannot wish that it should conform to our personal needs. And so, though I'm very glad to be going to Saint-Remy, nevertheless, it would be really fairer to men like myself to shove them into the Legion. I'm not sure what that's all about. We can do nothing about it. It's more than likely that they would turn me down, at least here where that has happened to me. It is too well known and above all exaggerated. I say this very, very seriously. Physically, I'm better than I've been in years and years, and I could well be a soldier. Let's think this over again, even though I'm going to Saint-Remy. A good handshake for you and your wife, ever yours, Vincent. When I wrote that one must not forget to appreciate what is good in those who are not impressionists, I didn't mean exactly that I wanted to urge you to be unbounded, to have an unbounded admiration of the salon. But I was thinking of a lot of men like Jourdan, for example, is just died at Avignon, of Attigna, Fayen, Perrin, all the people we used to know so well when we were younger. Why forget them, or why attach no importance to their equals? Why aren't Daubigny and Quast and Janine colorists, for instance? So many distinctions in Impressionism have not the importance that people have chosen to see in them. Crinolines has something pretty about them and consequently good, but in the end, the fashion was fortunately short-lived for all that, not for some people. And thus we shall always keep a sort of passion for Impressionism, but I feel that I return more and more to the ideas that I already had before I came to Paris. Can you see how he's with so much that's at stake. He's about to go into an asylum. He's very interested in art. That is something that is definitely he's invested a lot of his life into, but it's also something that can carry him, right? Thanks a lot, Charles. I appreciate that. Yeah, mediocrity hates talent. Now that you are married, we don't have to live for great ideas any longer, but believe me, for small ones only. And I find that a wonderful relief and don't complain of it at all. In my room, I have the famous portrait of a man, the wood engraving, which a tangerine by Monorobu, the big plate in Bing's sketchbook, the blade of grass, and so on and so on. Just now I'm reading Balzac's Médecine de Campagne, which is splendid. So he's reading while all this is happening. There's a character of a woman in it, not mad, but too sensitive, which is very attractive. I think he sees himself in this character. I'm not mad, I'm just too sensitive. I will send it to you when I have finished it. They have lots of room here in the hospital. There would be enough to make studios for a score or so of painters. I really must make up my mind. It is only too true that lots of painters go mad. It is a life that makes you, to say the least, very absent-minded. Is absent-mindedness madness? I mean, I walked my dog just before going live. I walked Timmy, and I realized, wow, I've actually left the stove on with lamb chops, and realized, wow, I'm pretty absent-minded. So went back in the house, turned the stove off. Nothing had burnt, but it was pretty close to, if it had been another 5 or 10 minutes, it would have burnt. And so is madness absent-minded, or is being focused on something a kind of passion that if you don't share the passion, it does seem mad, right? And there's a bit of give and take. If you're very focused on one thing, then you're not very focused on something else. Should you be focused on washing dishes and vacuuming and keeping your desk tidy, or should you be focused on something else that you're doing? If I throw myself fully into my work again, very good, but I shall always be cracked. So yeah, he seems to be saying that I have lost my marbles. Seems like he's saying that. If I could enlist for 5 years, oh, please stop talking about that. It's not going to happen anyway. I should recover considerably and be more rational and more master of myself. But one way or the other, it's all the same to me. I hope that there will be some canvases in the batch I've sent you which may give you some pleasure. If I go on being a painter, then sooner or later I shall probably be in Paris again. Well, he's right about that. And I promise myself in that case to give some old canvases a good overhaul. What is Gauguin doing? I'm putting off writing him again until I'm quite normal. But I often think of him, and I should so much like to know if everything is going comparatively well with him. Now, I don't know if you guys, tell me you follow me when I say this. Now, you guys know that I think that Gauguin actually sliced off Van Gogh's ear. Why would Van Gogh still want to be friends with him? Why would Van Gogh want to know anything about him if that was the case? And I can't help thinking about Baby Reindeer in that context. In other words, when you know someone isn't good for you or hasn't been good to you, you're nevertheless in a way addicted to that relationship in a way that's not very, in a way that's kind of destructive, but it's almost like someone is better than no one, or something is better than nothing. Do you know what I'm getting at? Is there anyone here that's watched Baby Reindeer? And I've got to admit, I've only watched, I couldn't really get beyond the second episode because it seemed to be quite sick. But this whole thing of where you in a relationship with someone that's really not good for you, but it's nevertheless a kind of something is better than nothing thing, because otherwise you'd be very alone or very lonely. Deborah, are you agreeing with the baby reindeer comparison? Do you guys think it's I'm on the right track there? Do you guys think it makes sense? I'm just talking about that woman that's basically stalking him. He kind of doesn't he end up in a relationship with her, and he knows it's not healthy, but it's kind of better than nothing. Yeah. And so isn't it the same with Van Gogh and Gauguin? I mean, it's a terrible relationship. I mean, it ended in a horrible way, but Van Gogh is still like, how's he doing? It's because he has no friends. It's because he's so lonely. And so it's something, even something really dysfunctional is better than nothing, right? Yeah. Yeah, but he still sticks around. I mean, he still allows her to be part of his life. Anyway, that's the part that like an obsession. Anyway, so he says, if I'd not been in such a hurry, if I'd kept my studio, then this summer I should have touched up all the canvases I sent you. So he's kind of blaming, and I think he's right. He's kind of blaming what has happened with him being in a hurry. He was in a hurry to get his studio going. He was in a hurry to get things off the ground with Gauguin. And because of that, he put pressure on himself, on Gauguin, on the whole enterprise, and the whole thing eventually blew up. What he needed to do voluntarily was slow down or step out of the road and just recalibrate and just kind of, you know, reach a sort of pace that was sustainable. And then he says, of course, so long as the impasto isn't dry all the way through, you cannot scrape it at it. You will see that the expressions of the two women are different from the expressions one sees in Paris. Is Signac back in Paris yet? Okay. I will really want to get through May. Let's see how many letters are left. So this is his first letter from Saint-Remy, and so he's obviously settled into the asylum by pretty much the first week of May. So there are quite a few. Wow. So can it be? Isn't there any letter in June? August 1890, it can't be. July 1890, July, well, this is 1890. I feel like I've, sorry, let's just try and get out of this thing and go to the chronology. (1889). May is over here. Okay. Sorry, May is over there. June, July, and then they really dry up over there. So what's this? Not quite sure why we're not seeing this. August 1890. It's the wrong year. Not quite sure what's going on. Do I need some more sleep? That's Auver's. Okay. Sorry about this, guys. I just seem to have lost my place. Let's go to 1889 and let's go to April. Okay. April, May. We've done that letter, we've done that letter, we've done this letter, and now this letter. Okay, well, let's do this letter and then we'll call it a day. Guys, happy with that? I might actually do Van Gogh letters tomorrow, but don't quote me on that just yet. Okay. Iceland, good to see you. Okay, so here we go. So this is the first letter that he writes from the asylum. Dear brother, it is high time at last that your new little sister had a chat with you herself, instead of leaving it to Theo to send her regards. When we were not yet married, I was always thinking, oh, at present you haven't got the courage to write about everything to Vincent, but now we are really and truly brother and sister, and I should be so very happy if you knew me a little too, and if possible, loved me a little. So it seems like, oh, cheaper, sorry, that's from Theo to Vincent. That's from Theo to Vincent, okay. And it's actually, I think, from Joe. Joe's actually writing this, saying, oh, at present you haven't yet got the courage to write about everything to Vincent. Now we are really and truly brother and sister, and I should be so very happy if you knew me a little and possible loved me a little. As for me, and this has been the case for quite a long time, Vil as well as Theo have told me so many things about you. So obviously this is really meaningful. Theo is having Joe, his wife, write her first letter to Vincent now that he's in the asylum, right? She's reaching out to him. And so he's making yet another friend, and he doesn't know it yet, but Joe is going to become a great friend and a great asset to the artist. She says, he's told me so many things about you, and here in the house there's so many things which remind one of you. At the moment I come across a charming little jug or vase or some such thing, and I'm sure to hear this was bought by Vincent. That Vincent thought so pretty. Hardly ever a day passes without us speaking of you. You see, I still speak of our house and do not seem to be able to accustom myself to saying the apartment. I should so much like you to see how pretty and cozily Theo had everything arranged before I came. The bedroom especially is so sweet, very light, and a great deal of pink in it. In the morning when I'm lying in bed, I have to look at that fine little peach tree in bloom of yours. So that's this one. And which looks at me so kindly every morning in its turn. Over the piano in our drawing room, we have one. Aunt Cornelia gave it to us. There also hangs a picture by you, a large one, which I like very much. It is a landscape in the neighborhood of Arles. Well, I must say, I also love that picture. That to me is one of the top 5 maybe pictures of Van Gogh. Isn't it beautiful? I wouldn't mind having that in my home. That's for sure. And isn't that a merry little picture? It's a quaint scene in the countryside. Looks like a very happy place. And then she says, the dining room is also full of them, but Theo is still dissatisfied with the arrangement, and every Sunday morning is spent hanging the pictures in other places and rearranging everything. It is so delightful on Sundays when Theo is at home all day. I well remember how as a child I always loved Sundays because at home they were so pleasant and cozy, something which most people could not understand. And now they are so much more so. So Monday meant a double festivity for me, for all the art shops were closed on account of the opening of the exhibition. Of course, we did not go to the exhibition, but enjoyed ourselves in our own way. Paris certainly looked beautiful that day. I so hope I shall come to love it as much as Theo does, but at times I'm very much afraid it won't be possible. It is so noisy that we are living in our quiet cité. It may not be an aristocratic quarter, but it is certainly a highly typical one. a big painter's studio across the way, a little arbor, and a few lilac trees, which are in deliciously full flower at the moment. Now, I must say, I can't read this without thinking you are definitely the right person to fall in love with Van Gogh's art and to take his legacy further. She says, what a lot of beautiful flowers there are in Paris. If I should have to enumerate some good qualities of Paris, this would surely be one of the very first things. She's intelligent, she's articulate, she's sensitive, she loves art, she understands what Vincent's painting. So if he feels very alone in the world, well, he's just increased his fan club by one, which is a lot. I mean, it's perhaps gone from 1 or 2 to 3. That's quite a big jump. That's 30% or 50%. Then she says, a great number of Theo's acquaintances have already come to see us in the evening. Last night, for instance, there was quite a reunion. Pissarro and his son Isaacson and the young Nibrich. But I don't know whether you know the latter. And my brother, who for some time now has been dining with us every day because his wife has gone to Holland. Now, if Vincent was feeling like, well, I don't want to go to Paris, and be a fifth wheel. Well, they seem to have Joe's brother hanging out there quite a lot as it is. So we probably would be a fifth wheel, but probably better than being a sixth wheel. Anyway, he goes on to say, I certainly wish I could speak French a little better. I can manage on my own when I do my shopping or when I speak to the femme de ménage, the charwoman, I guess that's the cleaning lady. But I think carrying on a conversation, especially when Theo is present, is something horrible. So I did not venture on a French letter, so I guess this letter is written in Dutch. Although I know that in point of fact you would have preferred it, but Will told me that she also confines herself to writing in Dutch. As soon as I feel that I'm getting to be a bit of a Parisienne, I'll start writing in French. Is that a bargain? Liz and Will have laid a little plot to come here this summer. I love the way they speak. I love the way there's that sort of color in their language. Laid a little plot to come here. I think I need to lay a little plot to go to Italy. The two of them, how pleasant it would be, particularly to have Vil here, how she would laugh at me, for she herself is such a clever little housekeeper. She can do everything, whereas I, to make a clean breast of it, I don't know how to do anything. Twice already I've let the rice burn, and once the prunes. Poor Theo, he has to swallow it all. So you can imagine how heartening, reassuring, entertaining, enjoyable this letter must be for Vincent. It's the first time he's ever heard from Joe, and she's being very self-deprecating. She's saying, I don't know how to cook. I burned the rice. I think she burnt the prunes as well, and poor Theo's got to eat this terrible food. There's a little bit of humor in it as well. For the rest, we are getting along very well together. We've been married 3 weeks today. So you can see it's very much in the sort of epicenter of all of this is Vincent's crisis. It's interesting that she says 3 weeks today. Anyway, it seems to me as though it happened long ago and also only a short while ago. It doesn't seem the tiniest little bit strange to us. It's as if we have always been together. What is worse is that I don't at all look like a married lady yet. Yesterday I went to pay our baker, and the good man could not possibly understand that I myself was Madame Van Gogh, and persisted in calling me Mademoiselle, which is really something too frightful. Quite a funny little story, right? She's got a great sense of humor, doesn't take herself too seriously, quite a whimsical woman. Now I have to prepare lunch for Theo. He'll be coming home in a minute or two, so I'll say goodbye for today. I hope I've not bored you too much, but the fact is that I've grown so accustomed lately to writing about all these little things which they like to hear about so much. So at the same time, Theo's been writing to Vincent, she's been writing to her family. And so she's saying, well, maybe it's time that I wrote to you. And she's saying, I've been writing to people in Breda and also to Amsterdam. and that I'm no longer able to write a serious letter. This will improve later on, I hope. Well, I think it's one thing that Vincent probably needs is a little bit of lightheartedness from someone completely different. With most cordial regards and wishing you all the best, your affectionate little sister Jo. Written in Dutch. What a wonderful and much needed boost to him at this time, right? Well, let's see how he responds. Well, another letter from Theo. I think let's just go to the next one. Well, there's no response yet from Vincent. Okay, so I'm just jumping ahead. We'll deal with those letters we've missed in episode 83. Let's just get the response to Theo. And so it's written around about the middle of May. He writes, "My dear Theo, thanks for your letter. You're absolutely right when you say that Monsieur Souls has been splendid in all of this. I am under the greatest obligation to him. Basically, thank you. I want to tell you that I think I've done well to come here because by seeing the reality of the assorted madmen and lunatics, I'm losing my vague dread, my fear of the thing. And so he's like, okay, well, I may be mad, but I'm not as mad as these guys. Okay, this is madness. He says, and bit by bit, I'm getting to consider that madness is just a disease like any other. Thus, the changing surroundings will do me good, I think. As far as I can tell, the doctor here is of the opinion that what I have had is some sort of epileptic attack. So that is the diagnosis. And so the doctors don't think he's mad. The doctors think something's going on kind of with his wiring. He said, I didn't ask him more about it. Have you received the case of paintings? I'm curious to know if they've suffered, yes or no. I have 2 more to go. The violet irises. That's a pretty nice painting, I must say. It's also one of his best. And then a lilac bush. That's this one. Not terribly fond of that. 2 subjects taken from the garden. The idea of my duty to get back to work to me occurs to me a lot. And I believe that all my faculties for work will soon come back to me. It's just that the work often absorbs me so much that I think that for the rest of my life, I'll always be a bit absent-minded. Well, that's not the end of the world. Absent-mindedness is not madness and awkward when shifting for myself. And then you can't help going through the first couple of paragraphs and like, dude, aren't you going to respond to your sister-in-law? Aren't you going to respond to Jo? And of course he does. He says here, I won't write you a long letter. I want to try to reply to my new sister's letter, which moved me very much. And we can imagine that it did. We know him, and so we know he did. And he says, I don't know if I'll be able to do it. In other words, he's feeling like, I want to write to her, but how do I do it? What do I say? Right? And so obviously he feels a little bit intimidated. He wants to make a good impression. It's a big deal to him. And so he writes, my dear sister, many thanks for your letter in which I especially looked for news of my brother. And I find it excellent. I see you have already noticed that he likes Paris. And this more or less surprises you since you do not like it at all. And that's kind of how he feels. Vincent also doesn't, kind of has a love-hate relationship with Paris. And he says, you rather mostly like the flowers there, such as the wisterias, I suppose, which are probably coming into bloom. Might it not be the fact that when you are fond of something, you see it better and more truly than when you are not fond of it? For him and me, Paris is certainly already something like a graveyard where many artists have perished, whom we once knew directly or indirectly. It's not really the most upbeat beginning, but let's go on. Certainly Malay, whom you will learn to like very much, and many others with him, tried to get out of Paris. But as for Eugene Delacroix, for instance, it is difficult to imagine him as a man otherwise than as a Parisian. All this is to urge you with all caution, it is true, to believe in the possibility that there are homes in Paris. You can make Paris your home. Anyway, fortunately, you are yourself his home. That is a tremendous compliment, right? That's is taken a roundabout route in giving her a really well thought out, a very considerate, a very kind compliment. You are Theo's home. And remember what I was saying in the beginning about the yellow house is just a building. Maybe you've put your hopes and dreams and wishes and blood, sweat, and tears into it, but how much the better to put your hopes into a person or an idea or some kind of mission. And he recognizes that in Theo, you are his home, right? It is rather, and I mean, don't you get a sense of what intelligent people we're dealing with? Theo, Vincent, and Joe. They're not shallow, superficial, poorly educated kind of dimwits. They are deep, wonderful people that happen to have a love for art. And then he says, it is rather queer, perhaps, that the result of this terrible attack, and it's interesting that that's how he phrases it to her, he calls it a terrible attack, is that there is hardly any very definite desire or hope left in my mind. And I wonder if this is the way one thinks when, with the passions lessened, one descends the hill instead of climbing it. And anyhow, my sister, if you can believe or almost believe that everything is always for the best, in the best of worlds, then perhaps you will also be able to believe that Paris is the best of the cities in it. Have you noticed that the old cab horses there have large, beautiful eyes? That's quite a delicate and specific memory that he's dredging up here. Imagine having that kind of a detailed memory. He exhorts her to look at the cab horses in Paris. That's something that is beyond us. We don't live in a world where that's possible anymore. He says, look at the beautiful eyes of the old cab horses, as heartbroken as Christians sometimes have. However it may be, we are neither savages nor peasants, and it is perhaps even a duty to like civilization so-called. Now remember a moment ago I was saying, how does this guy manage to give of himself when he's been treated so shabbily? And here's kind of the answer. He says, perhaps it's our duty to like civilization. It's quite a statement, that. I think it's the other wizard, the brown wizard, or was it one of the hobbits that says, but you're part of this world. I think it's what the one hobbit says to the Ents. You're part of this world, aren't you? Then he says, after all, it would probably be hypocrisy to say or think that Paris is bad when one is living there. Besides, the first time one sees Paris, it may be that everything in it seems unnatural, foul, and sad. Anyway, if you do not like Paris, bear in mind, he's talking about Paris at a time that it was industrializing. So there's a lot of smoke. Monet turned the smoke into mist and into softness. But it certainly, there were a lot of factories, and it's not, the Paris then is not quite the Paris of now. He says, anyway, if you do not like Paris, above all, do not like painting, nor those who are directly or indirectly concerned in it, for it is only too doubtful whether it is beautiful or useful. But what is to be done? There are people who love nature, even though they are cracked or ill. I guess he's referring to himself. Those are the painters. Then there are those who like what is made by men's hands, and these even go so far as to like pictures. Quite a profound letter, right? He says, though here there are some patients very seriously ill, bear in mind he's writing this about Paris from a madhouse. He says, the fear and horror of madness that I used to have has already lessened a great deal. And I think what's happened is he goes to the asylum and he sees, okay, this is what madness really is. This is what it really looks like. right? And though here you continually hear terrible cries and howls like beasts in a menagerie, there's what a descriptive way of describing the sights and sounds. Howls like beasts, terrible cries that you hear continually, and he's happy to be there. He's like, wow, it's not actually as bad as I thought. If there's anyone that can handle this, it's someone with the strength of mind of Van Gogh. He says, in spite of that, people get to know each other very well. He's finally he's got some companions and help each other when the attacks come on. When I'm working in the garden, so that's kind of where he's already based himself. He's gone into the garden of the asylum, and that's kind of what you're seeing in the image behind me. He says, they all come to look and assure you they have the discretion and manners to leave me alone, more than the good people of the town of All, for instance. And so here you have kind of a hilarious irony. You have a hilarious irony here where, whenever Van Gogh refers to the good people of all, he doesn't mean the good people of all, right? He means the arseholes of all. And so I think I need to refer to the good people of this complex as well. But what he's basically saying is these mad folks treat me better than the good people of all. That's quite a big statement. They're more interested, they're more connected to him, they're less judgmental than these mad people, than the good people of all. Anyway, he goes on to say, it may well be that I shall stay here long enough. I've never been so peaceful as here and in the hospital in all. Quite a ringing endorsement, right? That he's pretty happy where he is. I'm able to paint a little at last. Quite near here, there are some little mountains, grey and blue, and at their foot some very, very green cornfields and pines. Well, guess who mountain biked over those little mountains? I shall count myself very happy if I can manage to work enough to earn my living. Well, that's not going to happen. For it worries me a lot when I think that I've done so many pictures and drawings without ever selling one. Well, there he is speaking in plain English to his new sister. And that shouldn't be a surprise. That is him telling it like it is, and that's exactly what you'd expect. That's also not what he really would say to Theo. To Theo, he's been saying, you know what, I'm going to keep going. I'm not worried. It'll happen eventually. But now in this situation, he is kind of being quite truthful. Do not be in too much of a hurry to think that this is an injustice I myself don't know in the least. Thanking you again for having written to me. And I think this gives you another idea. This gives you another idea of the kind of person Van Gogh is, and also the kind of story he tells about himself, right? So can you see how he's minimizing going to the asylum to Joe when it really is a disaster? It is a catastrophe. It is a very bad situation that he's in. And although he's speaking of it in quite a light conversational way, he's about to go through a very, very tough period. Don't make the error of thinking that there's nothing wrong with him and that this here in the asylum is going to be a breeze. He's about to go through a very, very horrible time. He's about to have fits that are much worse than he's having now. He's about to go through a terrible experience, right? And so at the same time, him saying, don't think that this is an injustice. Well, it is. And so him saying, don't think that, it's also what he doesn't want people to think about the ear incident. I cut off my ear. Don't think about the other thing. Don't think that it's an injustice. I did this in terms of the gun incident. do not think of it as an injustice, but that's actually what happened. This is the way he makes himself less of a burden to those around him. He does it again and again and again, right? It's not once that he does it, and Gabby Petito did the same thing. She didn't blame the person who actually hit her, she blamed herself. She said, it's my fault, right? Because also she wants the adventure to continue, he wants the adventure to continue. So here we are getting a sense of understanding of how he thinks about or conveys his own situation to others, even though it's explicitly clear that that's not what's going on. But he's trying to, in a way, reshape his circumstances because of this, because he's actually a self-actualized individual with a lot of esteem. May not seem that way, but he's got quite a lot of esteem in terms of his own sense of self. He's got a very strong identity. He doesn't really have too much in terms of this. He does have very strong love and belonging with Theo, and now with Joe, which is going to develop, and a couple of individuals around him that he develops relationships with, but it's these above all. And that is why, in a way, it's an inversion, the same inversion you have here, where he has these, but he doesn't have these. There's an inversion in the narratives that he conveys about these serious milestones in his life. Does that make sense? And so he ends off saying, thanking you again for having written to me. I'm so very glad to think that now my brother is not going home to an empty apartment when he goes back in the evening. Must say that actually makes me want to, that is such a big statement as well. You know, he's saying something that really matters to him. He's saying, I know how lonely my brother is because I've been that guy, and actually I am that guy, right? He's saying, I'm so very glad to think that he's not going to an empty apartment anymore. Thanks to you, he's not going to an empty apartment anymore. That's such a poignant statement. I mean, that really means a lot to I think all three of them, because Vincent gets it because he's living it, but he also gets his brother's situation. Yeah, he is. I don't know why I'm getting kind of emotional. I actually watched season 2, episode 4 of, it's called the Tour de France Unchained. It's on Netflix. It's an episode called For Gino, and I cried. I really, definitely, just tears were running down my face. It's like, what's going on with you, you know? And I've definitely felt quite emotional dealing with this. And then he says, I shake your hand in thought and believe me, your brother Vincent. And so I don't know about you guys, but I think this is quite a moving, meaningful, and powerful Van Gogh Letters 82. I thought 81 was pretty powerful as it was. How could it not be when we're dealing with such big moments in a person's life? You know, this is a big moment. It's the end. It's the end, essentially, of the Yellow House. It's the destruction. It's a dream going up in smoke. It is devastating, and yet he goes through it with quite a lot of grace, and the people around him love him and take care of him. And not all of us are lucky enough to have that. Have someone remind us who we are and stand by us when we at our worst, right? Are you okay? No, I am okay. Okay, well, I'm going to end on that note. We didn't really go through all of this, but we can maybe deal with the rest of the official biography as we go through the rest of his time in the asylum. But thanks a lot, guys, for joining me here. Like I said, I might do 83 tomorrow, but I definitely will be going through it quite regularly because we don't want to lose track of the run up to Starry Night. I mean, all of this is really to give you an idea of how much was going on in the background of this person's heart and mind and life, and yet he still produced Starry Night. And another way of looking at it, if he wasn't going through so much suffering, so much adversity, if he didn't pay that price, would we have gotten Starry Night? Another way of thinking about it. Okay, as Chelsea says, thanks for being here, everyone. Charles says this show is a heartbreaker. I like hearing that from the guys as well. I mean, we're dealing with human subjects and a very human story. So yeah, as Robbie says, all guys. Okay. Anyway, that's it from me. 3-hour session. Thanks a lot for that, Deborah. And Mel says, thank you so much for this beautiful experience. Many thanks to everyone who's here. Lamtoon says, who else is going to rewind? Thanks for being with us, Robbie. I hope, Yvonne, that you have come back after being in Vegas to watch the rest of this. But it was good having you here when you were. So thanks a lot. Yvonne also went through her own trial, which I'm not going to talk about, but Yvonne knows about. And it's a secret trial. It's a secret place we go to that for whatever reason we don't fully talk about. And it yeah, I won't say any more than that, but a lot hangs on it. And I'm really glad that Yvonne's back, and I'm also glad that certainly this story has been something that I think has maybe carried Yvonne a little bit as well, and that means a lot to me. You know, that it has real meaning at a really important time for some of us. And you know, there are only 27 people in chat. It's 20 more than I need. I mean, if 1 or 2 or 3 people's lives are changed, you know, that can be something incredible. So it does mean something. And I know there are people beyond the 20. I mean, these videos tend to get watched by 150, 200, sometimes 300 people. Given how cerebral the subject matter is, it's worth it as far as I'm concerned. So that's why we had 82 episodes and not 8. Anyway, that's it from me. Is there anything else I want to share with you guys? Just that the apple tree and the peach tree are throwing off the last of their leaves, and it's quite incredible that it really is the middle of winter now. I mean, it's the summer solstice at Stonehenge, and my apple tree has still got quite a few green leaves. It does make one wonder what is happening to our world. And we need to think critically about that as well. Not just our world, like my life, like my journey, our world. And that's why when Van Gogh says we have a duty to civilization, think about what that means to you, what that duty is. Think about what that duty is to me and to the other people that you notice around you. What is our duty to civilization right now? May not be painting a picture, it might be painting the top of our roofs white to reflect sunlight. It might be, I don't know, thinking critically about what we do every day. Timmy, someone wants to give you smooches. So Timmy is I didn't actually call him, he just came by. I think he was like, I think that's enough now, master. I think that's enough now. Where's the weaver? Well, I'll try and get some photos for you guys of the weaver. How about that? The weaver's actually not in its full yellow coat because I don't know if you guys know this. As far as I know, the weaver gets like a matty color, like a almost like a gray color, and then when it's summer, it's bright yellow again. So right now the weaver's looking a bit scraggly. I did see something that kind of made me pause. I was going up the steps and I looked out the window, and there were two birds on a bird bath, and the one was a smaller version of the other. The one had a bright sort of orange yellow beak. It's called a olive thrush, and the other one was a juvenile version of it. And literally, what was happening was what looked to me like what was happening was the adult thrush was showing this juvenile bird where to drink and how to drink and what is available. And I just thought it was quite interesting. How do birds learn? Well, obviously from imitation. And isn't that how a lot of us learn? And so, that is how we learn. But another way to learn is through original thought. Now, how often do we do that? And this is, by the way, what an olive thrush looks like. Can you guys see that? They've kind of got bright orange beaks. And quite yellow feet. And so there was a smaller version of this bird with its offspring, just kind of showing it where to drink, and the one was imitating the other. It would look like that. Anyway, I thought I would just share that with you guys. Thanks for being here. Ison, are you still with us? Paddy, Chelsea, thanks also for manning the fort. Yeah, I know about that. And also just before solstice. I mean, that happened literally just before. Anyway, thanks, guys. And as Mal Stiller says, guys, keep weaving. Whatever it is, keep weaving. And I'll see you guys next time. Ciao. Wave. See you guys. Ciao.